The old Victorian house on Maple Street was my entire world when I was growing up. My father inherited it from his parents, and I can still picture my mother bragging about it to everyone who'd listen. "Just look at these original hardwood floors," she'd say during her endless backyard dinner parties, gesturing dramatically with her wine glass. "You just don't find craftsmanship like this anymore." I was 7 when we moved in, and while my mother was busy showing off her prized possession to her friends, I found solace in my father's company. Dad understood me in a way Mom never did. He'd notice when I finished one book and immediately appear with another, like magic. "Hannah," he'd say, his eyes twinkling as he pulled yet another novel from behind his back, "I think you're going to love this one." And I always did. Mom didn't get it. "Hannah, sweetie," she'd sigh, watching me curl up in the window seat with my latest treasure, "wouldn't you rather go play with the neighbor kids? Sarah from next door just got a new bike." "I'm good here, Mom," I'd reply, not looking up from my page. I could feel her disappointment from across the room, but Dad would just wink at me from behind his newspaper. I wasn't completely antisocial. I had my moments of glory at school, especially after I started writing for the school newspaper. My stories always got people talking, and even the popular kids would stop me in the hallway to ask when my next piece was coming out. But my favorite escape was still my grandmother's house, with its magical library room that smelled of old paper and leather. "A writer needs to read," Grandma would say, running her fingers along the spines of her beloved books. "How else will you learn to tell your own stories?" She'd let me spend hours in there, bringing me cookies and hot chocolate while I devoured everything from classic literature to modern mysteries. I was 12 when the police showed up at our door. I remember every detail of that moment: Mom's coffee cup shattering on the kitchen floor, the officer's grave expression, the words "terrible accident" echoing through our hallway. Just like that, Dad was gone. Mom cried for weeks. I'd hear her at night, muffling her sobs into her pillow. But then, something shifted. The tissues disappeared from her nightstand, replaced by makeup and perfume bottles. She started going out in the evenings, coming home with a bounce in her step and color in her cheeks. "Life goes on, Hannah," she told me one morning over breakfast, applying lipstick in her compact mirror. "We can't stay sad forever." I nodded, but something felt off. The way she said it, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. I didn't know it then, but that morning marked the beginning of the end of my childhood. Mom met Richard at some office party. Within a week, he was having dinner at our house. Within 2 weeks, he'd moved in his things. Within a month, they were married in a small courthouse ceremony. It happened so fast, I barely had time to process that this stranger was now living in Dad's house, sleeping in Dad's bed, sitting in Dad's chair at our dinner table. The first time Grandma met Richard, I could see the concern in her eyes. She pulled Mom aside into the kitchen, but their whispered conversation quickly turned into raised voices. "Linda, you barely know this man," Grandma hissed. "Think about Hannah." "I am thinking about Hannah," Mom shot back. "She needs a father figure." She had a father, Grandma's voice cracked. "And his memory deserves more respect than this." That was the last time Grandma was allowed in our house. Mom told her not to come back until she could be supportive. Richard never hit me or yelled at me, but he had other ways of making me feel unwelcome. He'd walk into a room where I was reading and immediately turn on the TV at full volume. If I was doing homework at the kitchen table, he'd start complaining about clutter. Once, when I was looking at Dad's old photos in the living room, Richard gathered them up and put them in a box. Mom watched it all and said nothing. Worse, she started sending me to my room whenever Richard came home from work. "Honey, Richard's had a long day," she'd say. "He needs some quiet time." Then Mom got pregnant, and whatever scraps of attention I had been getting disappeared completely. They turned Dad's old office into a nursery, cooing over paint samples and tiny clothes. When my sister Emily was born, you'd think she was the first baby ever to exist. One morning, I stood in front of Mom while she was feeding Emily. "Mom, none of my clothes fit anymore. I need new ones for school." She looked at me like I'd asked for a private jet. Hannah, do you have any idea how expensive babies are? We just had to buy Emily a new crib. But Mom, my jeans are all too short, and... For God's sake, Linda, Richard interrupted from behind his newspaper. The girl acts like we're made of money. When I was her age, I wore hand-me-downs. Mom sighed heavily. We'll go to the discount store this weekend. But this is the last time, Hannah. You're getting too expensive to maintain. Too expensive to maintain. Like I was a car with too many repair bills. I looked at Emily in her designer onesie, surrounded by new toys, and felt something inside me harden. I was trudging home from school one rainy Tuesday, lost in my thoughts, when I heard a familiar voice call my name. There, standing under a red umbrella with that mischievous smile I'd missed so much, was Grandma. Hannah, sweetheart. She pulled me into a tight hug that smelled of cinnamon and home. Oh, look at you. You've grown so tall. Grandma. I hugged her back fiercely, realizing just how much I'd missed her. I haven't seen you in forever. Her face clouded slightly. I know, dear. Your mother, well, she's made it clear I'm not welcome at the house anymore. Then her eyes twinkled. But what she doesn't know won't hurt her, right? How about we get some hot chocolate and catch up? At the small cafe around the corner, over steaming mugs and chocolate croissants, Grandma laid out her proposal. Your mother can't stop me from seeing my granddaughter, she said firmly. If she asks, just tell her you're out with friends. You do still have friends, don't you? And just like that, my life split in two. At home, I was the unwanted shadow, tiptoeing around Richard's moods and Mom's indifference. But my afternoons belonged to Grandma. We'd spend hours in her library, discussing books and writing. She'd help me with my homework, then we'd cook dinner together. Mom never questioned where I was spending my time. If anything, she seemed relieved when I'd come home late. This went on for about a year, until one night at dinner, Mom and Richard dropped their bomb. Emily needs her own room, Richard announced, cutting into his steak. She's getting too big for the nursery. I looked up from my plate, confused. But all the bedrooms are taken. Unless you're turning Dad's old office. We've decided to give her your room, Mom interrupted. You can sleep on the pull-out couch in the basement. The basement. The dark, damp space where Richard stored his tools and Mom kept old holiday decorations. Where the heating barely worked in winter. This isn't fair, I protested, looking to Mom for support. Dad would never. Well, your father isn't here, is he? Mom snapped. And quite frankly, Hannah, you should be grateful we're letting you stay here at all. Most kids your age would be happy to have any space to themselves. I sat there, fork frozen halfway to my mouth, as the full impact of her words hit me. Letting me stay here. Like I was some charity case they'd taken in, not the daughter who'd lived in this house since she was 7. Not the girl whose father had lovingly painted clouds on her bedroom ceiling when she was 10 because she said she wanted to sleep under the sky. When do you want me to move? I asked, my voice hollow. This weekend, Richard said. I want to start painting on Monday. Emily wants pink walls. That night, I lay in my bed for just 3 more days, and stared up at those fading clouds. I took a picture of them with my phone, knowing they'd soon be covered by whatever shade of pink Emily had chosen. Another piece of Dad erased. Another part of me displaced. Living in the basement turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The isolation gave me clarity, I needed a plan to get out. College became my lifeline, my ticket to freedom, and I threw myself into making it happen. Every afternoon at Grandma's house, I worked on my applications. My portfolio was growing impressive, editor of the school newspaper, 3 statewide creative writing competition wins, and a collection of short stories published in various youth literary magazines. My English teachers wrote glowing recommendations, especially Mrs. Peterson, who called me the most promising young writer I've encountered in 20 years of teaching. High school graduation day arrived with June's sticky heat. I sat among my classmates in the auditorium, scanning the crowd. Grandma was there, beaming proudly from the middle section, but Mom and Richard's seats remained empty. They'd announced at breakfast that Emily had a dance recital the same afternoon. After the ceremony, Grandma hugged me tight. "Your father would have been so proud," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She slipped me an envelope. Inside was a card with a beautiful note and enough cash for a new laptop. The acceptance letters started arriving in March. 3 rejections, 2 waitlists, and then, the one I'd been hoping for. Riverside State University offered me a partial scholarship to their prestigious creative writing program. My hand shook as I read the letter for the 10th time. That evening, I decided to share the news at dinner. Maybe, just maybe, Mom would be proud. Maybe she'd remember how Dad used to say I'd be a famous writer someday. "I got into Riverside State," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're offering me a partial scholarship for their writing program." Richard didn't look up from his phone. Mom paused, fork halfway to her mouth, then set it down slowly. "Oh, Hannah," she sighed, and my heart sank at her tone. "We need to talk about college." "What do you mean?" "I've got the scholarship, and Dad's college fund." "About that," Mom interrupted, placing her hand protectively over her slightly swollen belly, a gesture I'd grown to hate. "We've had to make some adjustments to our financial planning. With the new baby coming." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What adjustments?" "Emily's private school tuition is already significant, and with another baby on the way." "My college fund?" I repeated numbly. "The money Dad saved for my education?" "Your father would understand," Mom said, her voice hardening. "Family comes first. Family comes first." The words echoed in my head like a bad joke. I looked at my mother, this stranger who wore my mom's face, and realized something that had been true for years: I wasn't part of her family anymore. I stood up so fast, my chair toppled backward. "That money isn't yours to spend." My voice came out sharp and clear, surprising even me. "Dad worked overtime for years to save that money. He wanted me to go to college." Mom's face flushed red. "How dare you be so selfish? Your sister needs." "Emily is your daughter with Richard," I cut her off. "Dad's money was for me. His daughter. Or have you forgotten that's what I am?" Richard slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. "I've had enough of your attitude, young lady. Your mother and I have put up with your ingratitude for years. It's time she made a choice: either you start showing some respect, or..." "Or what?" I challenged. Mom stood up slowly, her hand still resting on her pregnant belly. "Or you can leave." The words hung in the air like poison. "Leave?" I repeated. "This is my house, Dad's house." "Actually," Mom's voice was ice cold, "since your father didn't leave a will, the house legally belongs to me. You're 18 now, an adult. I'm no longer legally required to provide for you." I stared at her in disbelief. This woman who used to pack heart-shaped sandwiches in my lunchbox, who once held me all night when I had a fever, was throwing me out of my own home. "You can't be serious." Mom walked to the front door and opened it wide. The spring evening air rushed in, carrying the scent of blooming lilacs, Dad's favorite. "Get out." I stood frozen for a moment, looking at this stranger in my mother's body. Then something inside me shifted, like a key turning in a lock. Without another word, I walked down to my basement room and started packing. It didn't take long, most of my belongings were books anyway. I could hear Emily upstairs, asking in her little voice what was happening. Richard's gruff response. Mom's silence. 20 minutes later, I walked out of my childhood home with 2 duffel bags and a backpack. I didn't look back. Grandma opened her door before I could even knock, one look at my face telling her everything she needed to know. She pulled me into her arms, and finally, I let myself cry. When I'd calmed down enough to tell her everything, her face grew stormy, but her voice remained steady. "You'll stay here, of course." And I'm paying for whatever that scholarship doesn't cover. Grandma, no, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm telling. She squeezed my hand. Your father would never forgive me if I let his daughter's dreams die because of. She paused, choosing her words carefully, this situation. 3 months later, I was moving into my dorm at Riverside State. I'd found a job at the campus cafe that worked around my class schedule. Between that, Grandma's help, and my scholarship, I could just about make it work. Mom never called. Never texted. Never tried to find out if I was okay. I deleted her number from my phone but couldn't delete the ache in my chest that appeared every time I saw other students' parents visiting them on weekends. Junior year of college brought an unexpected turn in my life. While working on yet another creative writing assignment, I had an idea that wouldn't let go. It wasn't my usual style. Instead of literary fiction, I found myself writing a psychological thriller about a woman uncovering dark family secrets. Maybe I had some things to work through. You should enter it in the National Emerging Writers Competition, my favorite professor suggested after reading the first few chapters. It's different, raw, honest. I spent months perfecting the manuscript, writing between classes and cafe shifts, often staying up until dawn. When I finally submitted it under the pseudonym E.J. Blake, I didn't expect anything. The competition was notorious for attracting thousands of entries. Then came the call. Is this Hannah Morrison? A woman's crisp voice asked. I'm calling from Riverside Publishing regarding your submission to the National Emerging Writers Competition. I gripped my phone tighter. Yes? Ms. Morrison, we're pleased to inform you that the Glass House has won first prize. Furthermore, we'd like to offer you a publishing contract. I sat down hard on my dorm room floor. I'm sorry, what? The advance they offered was more money than I'd ever seen. The contract arrived the next day by courier, 12 pages of legal language that basically said they believed in me and wanted more books. The book hit shelves 4 months later. The reviews started rolling in. A stunning debut. Breathtakingly honest. A new voice in contemporary fiction. By the time I graduated college, I had 2 more books out under my pseudonym, both bestsellers. My second advance bought me a beautiful apartment in the city. The third let me quit my cafe job and write full-time. Grandma kept me updated on family news, though I never asked. Emily started first grade, she mentioned during one of our weekly dinners. And the little one, Thomas, just started kindergarten. I nodded, pushing my pasta around my plate. It was strange to think I had siblings out there who didn't know I existed. But I felt good without them, really good. Especially after I met David at a local bookstore where I was doing research for my 4th novel. He was a literature professor who had no idea his favorite new author was sitting right next to him in the classic literature section. E.J. Blake's latest book, he'd said, noticing me looking at a display of my own work. Brilliant stuff. Wish I knew who they really were. I smiled mysteriously. Maybe they just value their privacy. We married 2 years later in Grandma's backyard, surrounded by books and fairy lights. David insisted on reading a passage from the Glass House during his vows, still unaware he was quoting his own bride. We bought a house in a quiet neighborhood, with a library bigger than my old basement room and a garden full of lilacs. Life was good, better than good. And then one day there was an unexpected turn. It's time, Marcus, my publisher, announced during our quarterly meeting. Your new book is your strongest yet, and we think revealing E.J. Blake's identity would create exactly the buzz we need for the launch. Marcus was right, of course. The reveal was orchestrated perfectly, a major literary event at the Grand Plaza Hotel. Journalists, critics, and fans packed the ballroom. I stood backstage, my heart hammering. Ready? David whispered, straightening my blazer. No, I laughed nervously. But when has that ever stopped me? The moment I stepped onto that stage, camera flashes exploding like stars, I felt strangely calm. Hello, I said into the microphone. I'm Hannah Morrison, but you might know me better as E.J. Blake. The room erupted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My face was everywhere: magazine covers, morning shows, literary blogs. Mystery author revealed. E.J. Blake, literature's best-kept secret. The woman behind the words. Then came the message on social media. Hannah, sweetheart. I've been watching you on TV. You look so beautiful, so successful. I've missed you so much. Can we talk? I want to make things right. Love, Mom. My finger hovered over the delete button. After 14 years of silence, now she wanted to talk? I have nothing to say to you, I wrote back. Please don't contact me again. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, I was in my home office when David called up from downstairs. There's someone at the door. I knew before I reached the foyer. Mom stood on my porch, older but still recognizable. Her eyes were red and puffy. Oh, Hannah, she cried, stepping forward with outstretched arms. I stayed behind the screen door. What do you want? She wiped her eyes, composing herself with surprising speed. I've been following your success. You've done so well for yourself. No thanks to you. I know. I made mistakes. She wrung her hands. But I'm here because, well, Emily is graduating high school next month. She's so bright, Hannah. She got accepted to several colleges, but with Thomas still in school and the economy being what it is. I let out a harsh laugh. You're here for money? She's your sister, Mom pressed. And I know you're doing well now. Those books must bring in quite a bit. My sister? I interrupted. The same sister you gave my room to? The sister you spent my college fund on? That sister? Hannah, please. We're family. No. My voice was steel. We're not family. Family doesn't throw their child out on the street. Family doesn't steal their college fund. You made your choice 14 years ago, Mom. You chose Richard and your new family over me. You don't get to show up now, acting like a loving mother, just because you want my money. You ungrateful, selfish brat. Mom's voice rose to a shriek. After everything we did for you. She was causing a scene now, her voice echoing down our quiet street. You'd let your own sister suffer, just to spite me. I stepped back inside. Goodbye, Mom. The door closed with a satisfying thud, drowning out her continued screams. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. A week later, David called me into the living room, his face grim. On the TV screen was my mother, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as she spoke to a sympathetic interviewer. My daughter abandoned us, she sobbed. As soon as she got famous, she forgot where she came from. Now her little sister needs help with college, and she won't even answer our calls. Money changed her. Success made her cruel. The interview was just the beginning. Soon, my social media was flooded with hate messages from strangers who'd read Mom's posts about her heartless daughter who threw away her family for fame. Karma will get you, one comment read. What kind of person abandons their family, said another. Your poor mother. Your poor sister. I was shell-shocked until Marcus called. We're holding a press conference, he said firmly. Time to tell your side. I don't want to air my dirty laundry in public, I protested. Hannah, he said gently, you've built your career on telling the truth through your stories. Maybe it's time to tell your own. The next morning, I stood at the podium, cameras flashing. Grandma sat beside me, her spine straight as steel, her eyes clear and determined. My name is Hannah Morrison, I began, my voice steady. And this is the story my mother isn't telling you. For the next hour, we laid out everything. The college fund that was stolen. The basement bedroom. The cruel stepfather. The day I was thrown out. Grandma provided bank statements showing she'd paid for my education. I had old text messages, school records, witnesses from my teenage years. I didn't abandon my family, I concluded. They abandoned me. The only family I had left was my grandmother, who took me in when my own mother threw me away. I built myself up from nothing, with no help from the woman now demanding I fund her new family's dreams. The story broke like a tsunami. Author reveals years of family abuse, the headlines read. Mother's claims backfire. The true story behind E.J. Blake. My latest book shot to #1 on every bestseller list. Mom tried one more social media rant, but my lawyer's cease and desist letter shut that down quickly. One more false statement, I warned her, and I'll see you in court. She finally fell silent. That was 5 years ago. Life has settled into a peaceful rhythm since then. David and I have our quiet home, our library, our garden. Grandma comes for Sunday dinner every week, and we laugh and talk and share stories, real ones, honest ones. Sometimes I think about Emily and Thomas, the siblings I'll never know. I hope they're happy. I hope they're loved. I hope their mother learned to be better for them than she was for me. But mostly, I don't think about that part of my past at all. I've learned that family isn't always about blood, sometimes it's about the people who choose to stay when others walk away. Sometimes it's about building something new from the ashes of what was lost. I remember the day Veronica came into our lives. It was about a year after Mom passed away. Dad was still a bit lost, moving through life like he was walking in a fog. Then Veronica showed up, all smiles and sweet words. Dad thought she was a blessing, I wasn't so sure. "Hey, pumpkin," Dad said one evening, his voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "I want you to meet someone special. This is Veronica." I looked up from my coloring book, eyeing the tall woman standing beside him. She had this big, bright smile, but her eyes didn't match it. They were like little calculators, sizing me up. "Hello, sweetie." Veronica knelt down to my level, her voice too sugary. "I've heard so much about you. Your dad tells me you're the smartest little girl in town." I just nodded, not sure what to say. Dad looked at me, his eyes begging for approval. "Isn't she great, Dakota?" "Yeah, she's nice," I mumbled, turning back to my coloring. I wasn't good at lying, even then. The first few weeks were okay. Dad seemed happier, and Veronica tried to play the part of the caring stepmom. But then I started noticing things. Like how she'd be all nice when Dad was around, but cold and distant when it was just us. One day, she came home with a bunch of shopping bags. "I got you some new clothes, darling," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "I know how fast kids your age grow." I was excited at first, until I tried them on. Everything was way too big. The sleeves hung past my hands, and the pants pulled around my feet. I looked like I was wearing someone else's clothes. "Dad, look," I said when he got home, showing him the oversized clothes. "Veronica got them for me, but they're too big." He just chuckled and ruffled my hair. "She's thinking ahead, honey. You'll grow into them. It's smart shopping." I wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't smart, it was weird. But I didn't. I knew it would just make him sad. School became a nightmare after that. Kids can be mean, and they latched onto my baggy clothes like sharks. "Hey, Scarecrow," they'd shout as I walked by. "Where's the rest of your farm?" I tried to tell Veronica, to ask for clothes that fit. But she just waved it off. "Kids are cruel," she said, not even looking up from her magazine. "You need to toughen up." That's how it went for months. Dad was in his own world, happy with Veronica, and I was, just there. The girl with the too big clothes, and a stepmom who couldn't care less. "Veronica, can we get some clothes that fit me better?" I asked one day, trying to sound brave. "The kids at school make fun of me." She looked at me, her eyes cold. "You need to learn to be grateful," she snapped. "I'm doing my best here. You could at least try to appreciate it." I didn't know what to say to that. It felt like no matter what I did, it was wrong. I was wrong. That night, I heard them talking. Dad was saying how great Veronica was with me, how lucky we were to have her. I wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't great, she wasn't even nice. But I didn't. I just lay there in bed, feeling small and alone, listening to them laugh and talk in the kitchen. I remember this one morning, Dad had to leave early for work. He kissed my forehead, saying, "Dakota, be good for Veronica, okay?" I nodded, though inside, I was dreading another day alone with her. As soon as the door closed, Veronica's smile vanished. "Get dressed. We're going shopping," she said, her voice sharp. In the car, I tried to make conversation. "Can we get some jeans? Maybe a few tops that fit?" She glanced at me, her eyes cold. "You'll wear what I buy, and you'll be thankful. Got it?" At the store, it was the same old story. She picked out clothes that were way too big. When I protested, she snapped, "Stop whining. You're lucky I'm spending money on you at all." Back at home, I tried to alter the clothes to fit better. Veronica caught me and lost it. "What do you think you're doing? Ruining perfectly good clothes." "I'm just trying to make them fit," I mumbled. "You're ungrateful. Do you know how many kids would kill to have a stepmom like me?" I wanted to say, "Not many, I bet." But I kept quiet. Arguing with Veronica was like talking to a brick wall. A few weeks later, she joined the school parent council. It was her new stage, and she played her part perfectly. I overheard her talking to other parents at a school event, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's so hard, raising someone else's child," she sighed. "But I just love her like my own." The other parents ate it up. "You're such a saint," one of them said. "Taking on such a big responsibility." I felt sick listening to her. At home, it was a different story. If I left a cup on the table or forgot to make my bed, she'd go off. "Look at this mess. Your mother would be ashamed." One night, I tried to talk to Dad about it. "Veronica's different when you're not around," I said, hoping he'd listen. He shook his head, a tired look on his face. "She's doing her best, honey. You need to give her a chance." "But Dad." "No buts. She's your stepmom now. You need to respect her." It was like talking to a statue. Dad wouldn't hear a word against Veronica. I felt so alone, like I was trapped in a nightmare and couldn't wake up. Life with Veronica was like walking on eggshells, never knowing when she'd snap. I was counting down the days until I could leave for college and start my own life. But then, everything changed again. It was a Tuesday morning, just like any other. Dad was rushing around, getting ready for work, and I was trying to avoid Veronica's morning mood. Suddenly, Dad clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain. "Dad!" I screamed, rushing to him. Veronica came running in, her usual mask of concern back in place. "What's happening?" "I don't know, he's in pain." I was panicking, tears streaming down my face. Veronica was on the phone in seconds, calling for an ambulance. But it was too late. Dad was gone before they even got there. The next few days were a blur. Relatives I hadn't seen in years came pouring in, offering their condolences. Veronica was the grieving widow, perfectly playing her part. She'd cry on cue, telling everyone how much she loved Dad, how she didn't know how she'd manage without him. At the funeral, she gave a eulogy that would have won an Oscar. "He was the love of my life," she sobbed into the microphone. "And I will miss him every day." I stood there, numb, watching this performance. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone it was all an act. But I couldn't. I just stood there, feeling more alone than ever. After the funeral, once everyone had left, Veronica's mask slipped. We were alone in the house, just the two of us. She turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. "Now that your father's gone, things are going to change around here," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You're going to learn to respect me." I was still in shock from Dad's death, and her words felt like a slap in the face. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't play dumb with me, Dakota. she hissed. Your father's not here to protect you anymore. And I'm not going to put up with your attitude. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father had just died, and all she could think about was herself. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice shaking with anger. He was your husband. How can you be so cold? She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Oh, please. Your father was a means to an end, nothing more. And now that he's gone, I'm in charge. You do well to remember that. I stared at her, feeling a mix of rage and despair. She was right about one thing, Dad wasn't here to protect me anymore. I was on my own with this woman who saw me as nothing but a nuisance. Life with Veronica after Dad's death was unbearable. She turned the house into a prison, and I was the unwilling inmate. I knew I had to get out, but I didn't know how. That's when Aunt Lucy stepped in. One evening, Aunt Lucy came over. She was Dad's younger sister, a feisty woman with a no-nonsense attitude. She had heard about Dad's passing and came to see how I was doing. But when she saw the way Veronica treated me, she was furious. This is no way to treat a child, Veronica, Aunt Lucy said, her voice stern and unwavering. Veronica just rolled her eyes. She's not a child anymore, Lucy. She needs to learn discipline. Aunt Lucy wasn't having any of it. Discipline? Is that what you call this? She's practically a prisoner in her own home. I remember sitting there, watching them argue, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Aunt Lucy was taking my side, something no one else had done since Dad died. Listen, Veronica, I'm not going to stand by and watch you treat her like this, Aunt Lucy continued. She's coming with me. Veronica laughed, a cold, cruel sound. And what makes you think you have any say in this? I'm her guardian now. Aunt Lucy's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. I'm not going to let you ruin her life. That night, Aunt Lucy took me to her place. It was a small, cozy house, nothing like the cold, imposing one I'd been living in with Veronica. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. You're going to stay with me from now on, Aunt Lucy said, sitting me down at her kitchen table. I've spoken to a lawyer. We're going to fight for your custody. I was overwhelmed. But Veronica said she's my guardian. Aunt Lucy shook her head. She may be your guardian for now, but that doesn't mean it's permanent. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. The legal battle was tough. Veronica fought tooth and nail to keep me, not because she cared, but because she wanted control. But Aunt Lucy was a fighter, and she had a good lawyer. After months of back and forth, the court finally awarded custody to Aunt Lucy. Moving in with Aunt Lucy was like stepping into a new world. She was kind and caring, the complete opposite of Veronica. She encouraged me to pursue my interests and supported me in everything I did. Life's too short to be miserable, she'd say. You've got to find what makes you happy and go for it. I took her advice to heart. I started doing better in school, made new friends, and began to feel like a normal teenager again. Aunt Lucy was more than just a guardian, she was a mentor, a friend, a beacon of light in the darkness that had been my life. Living with Aunt Lucy gave me the stability and love I needed to heal from the years of neglect and emotional abuse I'd suffered under Veronica. For the first time, I started looking forward to the future, dreaming about what I could become. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a new life, and I was determined to make the most of it. Years had passed since I last saw Veronica. I was now working at a reputable firm, forging my own path. The past seemed like a distant memory until one ordinary day, my phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Dakota Harrison speaking, I answered, expecting a routine work call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, clinical. Hello, Ms. Harrison, this is Nurse Jenkins from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about your mother. She's been admitted here. A wave of confusion hit me. My mother passed away years ago, I corrected, my voice tinged with surprise. The nurse quickly clarified. I apologize for the confusion. I meant your stepmother. She's listed you as her next of kin. My mind raced. Why would Veronica list me? After everything? What happened to her? I asked, a mix of curiosity and old resentment bubbling up. She's had a serious fall and requires surgery. She's been asking to see you, the nurse explained. I was torn, a whirlwind of emotions clouding my judgment. I'll think about it, I said, ending the call. That evening, I shared the news with Aunt Lucy. Her reaction was a mix of concern and disbelief. Why would she ask for you after all this time, and after all she did? I don't know, I replied, feeling a turmoil of emotions. Part of me wants to see if she's changed. But another part of me remembers the pain she caused. Aunt Lucy gave me a reassuring look. You don't owe her anything, Dakota. Remember that. The next day, driven by a strange sense of closure, I found myself at the hospital. Walking into Veronica's room felt like stepping into a forgotten world. She looked frail, a shadow of the formidable figure she once was. Her eyes brightened when she saw me. Dakota, my dear, you came. Veronica's voice was weak, but laced with the same old theatricality. I'm here because I was curious, I stated plainly, maintaining a distance. Dakota, I know I wasn't the best to you, but deep down, I've always loved you, she said, her voice quivering. I looked at her skeptically. The years hadn't softened my memories. Loved me? You have a strange way of showing it. Veronica reached out, her hand trembling. I made mistakes, but I am alone now. I need help, and you're all I have left. Her words, meant to tug at heartstrings, left me cold. You're alone because of the choices you made, Veronica, not because of circumstances. She persisted, her eyes pleading. Please, Dakota, I have nobody else. I do love you, you have to believe me. I studied her for a long moment. The woman who had tormented my childhood was now lying here, claiming love. It was hard to digest. I'll hear what you have to say, I finally said, not committing to anything but curious enough to stay. But don't expect me to forget the past so easily. Sitting across from Veronica in the stark, sterile hospital room, I could hardly reconcile this frail figure with the woman who had once so masterfully controlled our household. Yet, as she began to speak, the familiar undertones of manipulation in her voice were unmistakable, reminding me that some things never truly change. Dakota, she started, her voice quavering, I've made a mess of things since your father passed. The inheritance, it's all gone. Her admission didn't surprise me. Gone? How? I asked, though a part of me didn't want to hear the sordid details. I wasn't wise with the money, she confessed, avoiding my gaze. Bad investments, debts, it's all squandered. I shook my head in disbelief. This was the woman who used to preach about prudence and responsibility, and you're telling me this why? Veronica looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. The doctors say I need surgery, but I can't afford it. I have no insurance left. So, what do you expect me to do about it? I asked, feeling a mixture of anger and incredulity. I need your help, Dakota. I need you to pay for the surgery, she said, the tone of her voice shifting from plea to expectation. I couldn't help but laugh, albeit bitterly. After everything you've put me through, you really think I'd help you? She tried to play the sympathy card again. You're my family, Dakota. The only one I have. Family? I retorted. You never treated me like family. Why should I start now? Her demeanor changed then, the mask of the frail, sick woman slipping. You owe me, Dakota. I took care of you when your father died. You call that care? You made my life miserable. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. Ungrateful child, she hissed, her face contorting into a scowl. I should have thrown you out when I had the chance. And why didn't you? I challenged her. Because I thought there was something in it for me, she admitted with a sneer. But you owe me, and you're going to pay, one way or another. Her threat was as clear as it was desperate. You're threatening me? After all these years, you still think you can control me? I'm not just threatening, Dakota. I'll sue you if I have to. I'll claim alimony, emotional distress, whatever it takes. She spat out, her voice filled with venom. Go ahead and try. I shot back, standing up. You won't get a single penny from me. She was seething with rage now. You'll regret this, Dakota. I'll make your life hell again. After my meeting with Veronica, I was seething with anger and disbelief. I couldn't fathom her audacity, her sheer nerve. I vented to Aunt Lucy over a cup of strong coffee in her cozy kitchen. Can you believe that woman? I raged, slamming my mug down. After all these years, she's still trying to control me, to squeeze me for every penny. Aunt Lucy, ever the rock, shook her head in disgust. She's a snake, Dakota. Always has been. Thinks she can just waltz back into your life and demand money? It's ludicrous. I was pacing now, my heart racing. She's threatening to take me to court, Lucy, for alimony, of all things. Let her try. Aunt Lucy snorted. She won't get a dime. You're not responsible for her mess. But Veronica was true to her word. A few weeks later, I was served with papers. She was suing me for alimony, claiming she was entitled to it after years of caring for me. It was laughable. In court, Veronica played the frail, wronged woman. Your Honor, I took this girl in when her father passed, she said, her voice oozing fake sincerity. I provided for her, and now she's abandoning me in my time of need. I could hardly believe the gall. When it was my turn, I stood, my hands trembling with a mix of nerves and anger. That's a lie, Your Honor. She made my life a living hell. My aunt here has been my guardian and support for years. The judge looked over his glasses at Veronica. Is this true, Mrs. Harrison? Were you not this girl's legal guardian? Veronica faltered, her facade cracking. Well, legally, no. But morally, I was her. Morally? I cut in, unable to contain my frustration. There was nothing moral about the way you treated me. The judge reviewed the case, his expression stern. After considering the testimonies and the fact that Ms. Harrison's aunt was her legal guardian for the latter years, this court finds no basis for alimony. Claim dismissed. Veronica's face twisted into a mask of rage and disbelief. This isn't over, Dakota, she spat as we left the courtroom. But it was over. As Aunt Lucy and I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Veronica's last attempt to control me had failed. I was free from her grasp, once and for all. You did good, Dakota, Aunt Lucy said, squeezing my hand. She can't hurt you anymore. I nodded, feeling a surge of relief and newfound strength. I know. It's finally over. That day marked the end of a long, painful chapter in my life. Veronica had no hold over me anymore. I had faced her in court and won. I was free to live my life on my terms, without the shadow of her manipulation looming over me. The courthouse steps behind me felt like a bridge between my troubled past and a hopeful future. Aunt Lucy and I headed to a small cafe nearby, a place that had become our spot for post-court discussions. So, it's finally over, I said, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. I can't believe after all these years, I'm finally free of her. Aunt Lucy nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and relief. You stood up to her, Dakota. That took guts. You've come a long way from the scared little girl you once were. I smiled, a genuine sense of accomplishment washing over me. Yeah, I guess I have. It's just, I never thought it would end like this. It rarely does, Aunt Lucy said, taking a sip of her tea. But the important thing is it did end. You can finally put Veronica and all that mess behind you. Her understanding and support were like a beacon in the dark. Thanks, Lucy. I don't know what I would have done without you. She smiled warmly. That's what family is for. And remember, you've got a whole life ahead of you. A life that's yours to shape. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about future plans, my work, travel dreams, and personal goals. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead. As I walked home that evening, the city lights sparkled a little brighter, and the air felt a little fresher. I realized that for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from Veronica's shadow, free from the fear and the pain she had caused. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window, looking out over the bustling city. This was my world now, a world full of possibilities. I thought about everything I had overcome, the battles I had fought, and the strength I had found within myself. I was no longer the victim of my past, but the architect of my future. I decided to start a journal, to document this new chapter in my life. As I penned down my first entry, I felt a sense of peace and optimism. The road ahead would have its challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. Here's to new beginnings, I whispered to myself, closing the journal with a sense of finality. Veronica's chapter in my life was closed, but mine was just beginning. I was ready to write my own story, one filled with hope, resilience, and the freedom to be who I truly was.
My name is Emma, and this is my story, a story of dreams, struggles, and the harsh realities of life. I'm 32, working as a manager in a reputable company. 6 years ago, I married David, an engineer in a local factory. We were young, in love, and hopeful about our future together. I remember sitting in our cozy living room one evening, the fading light of the day casting soft shadows around us. David was fiddling with his phone, a habit that seemed to consume him more each day. "David, can we talk about something important?" I asked, turning off the TV to catch his attention. He looked up, a bit distracted. "Sure, Em, what's up?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "You know, we've been trying for a baby for so long. I've been saving money from my salary and the rent from the apartment I inherited from Dad. We have a good amount now for our future child's upbringing and education." David nodded, his expression unreadable. "Yeah, I know. You've been great with the savings and all." The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. It was David's parents, Joan and Mike, coming in with their usual air of expectancy. They lived in a small house and often hinted about wanting something bigger. "Emma, dear, we've been thinking," Joan started, settling herself on the couch. "It's about time we looked for a bigger house, you know, something more comfortable." I exchanged a quick glance with David. "Joan, we've talked about this. David and I are saving for our future child. We can't really afford to help with a house right now." Mike chimed in, his tone a bit harsh. "But you guys have been trying for a child for years. Who knows if that will ever happen?" I felt a sting in my heart at his words. David stayed silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Mike, that's not fair," I said firmly. "We're still hopeful. And we need to plan for that future." The evening ended with an awkward goodbye. As they left, I turned to David, looking for some support. But he just shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "It's complicated, Em. They're my parents, after all." I nodded, feeling a growing distance between us. "But we have our own family to think about, David. Our future." The days leading up to the big reveal were filled with a mix of anticipation and nervousness for me. I had always dreamed of the moment I'd tell David we were going to be parents. After years of trying, the positive result on the pregnancy test felt like a miracle. That evening, as I waited for David to come home, I practiced how I would break the news. Would I just blurt it out, or make it a grand reveal? The possibilities played out in my mind, each ending with David sweeping me up in a hug, overjoyed at our impending parenthood. But life, as I was about to learn, doesn't always follow the script you write in your head. David arrived home later than usual, his footsteps heavy, his shoulders slumped. The lines on his face seemed deeper, like he was carrying the weight of the world. "David, you're home," I said, my voice quivering with excitement. "I have some incredible news." He barely looked up as he dropped his bag by the door. What's up, Em? His voice was tired, devoid of the usual warmth I was accustomed to. Taking a deep breath, I held up the pregnancy test. I'm pregnant, David. We're going to have a baby. I expected joy, surprise, maybe even tears. What I didn't expect was the look of sheer panic that crossed his face. Pregnant, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Now? This is really bad timing. My heart sank. Bad timing? David, we've wanted this for years. Why would it be bad timing? He sank into the couch, covering his face with his hands. After a long pause, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and resignation. I've done something. The money we saved, the money for our future child. I gave it to my parents. For a new house. And I took out a loan to cover the rest. His words hit me like a physical blow. You did what? Our savings? How could you do that without talking to me? I thought we weren't going to have a child, Emma. I wanted to do something for my parents, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. But what about us? Our dreams? Our plans? I felt a mix of anger and disbelief churning inside me. David stood up, pacing the room in agitation. I don't know, Em. I just didn't think it would happen. We can't afford a child now, not with the loan and everything. Tears blurred my vision. This was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of our life, and instead, it was unraveling at the seams. So, what are you saying? That we can't have this baby? My voice broke with the weight of my emotions. I don't know, Emma. I just don't know, he said, his voice hollow. That night, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation slowly sank in. The joy of my pregnancy was overshadowed by David's betrayal. Our savings, the foundation of our future, was gone. The man I had shared my dreams with had made a choice that shattered them in an instant. As I lay there, feeling the first faint stirrings of life inside me, I realized my journey ahead was filled with uncertainty and fear. The tension in the house had been thick enough to cut with a knife ever since David confessed about the money. Each day that passed was a silent echo of the chaos brimming inside me. I was pregnant, isolated, and betrayed by David, the man I once saw as my partner in everything. One evening, I couldn't take the silence and the distance anymore. I needed answers, clarity, something to make sense of the mess we were in. David was lounging on the couch, lost in some TV show, a temporary escape from our reality. David, we need to talk. Now, I said, my voice trembling with a cocktail of anger and fear. He barely looked at me, a sigh escaping him. What now, Emma? This whole situation. It's unbearable. I'm carrying our child, David. Our future. And all you do is avoid me. I was almost shouting, the pent-up frustration pouring out. David turned off the TV, his face set in a hard line. What do you want me to say, Emma? That everything's going to be okay? Because it won't. We're in deep trouble here. And whose fault is that? You gave away our future for what? To please your parents? The words were bitter, each one tasting of betrayal. He stood up abruptly, his voice rising. Maybe having this baby isn't the best idea right now, Emma. Have you thought about that? I felt like I'd been punched. Are you telling me to get an abortion? He avoided my gaze, shifting uncomfortably. My parents think it might be for the best. And I think they might be right. I was aghast, tears welling up in my eyes. Your parents? You're taking their advice over what we want. Over what I want. David ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched on his face. I don't know, Emma. We can't afford a baby. We're drowning here. That's no excuse to end a life, David. Our baby's life. My voice broke, the reality of his words sinking in. He turned away, his voice cold and detached. If you're so set on having this baby, then maybe you can't stay here. That hit me like a ton of bricks. You're kicking me out? Your pregnant wife. I don't know, Emma. I just can't deal with this. He was almost yelling now, something I'd never seen him do. That night, I packed my bags through a veil of tears. My home, my marriage, my dreams, all were crumbling around me. I moved into my small apartment on the city outskirts, the one place that was truly mine. But in the midst of the turmoil, a fierce determination took root. I was going to have this baby, with or without David. I was scared, yes, but more than that, I was resolute. This baby was a part of me, and I would do whatever it took to give it a life. The first few weeks in my old apartment were like living in a daze. The walls, once familiar, now echoed with the loneliness of my new reality. I was pregnant, alone, and the future seemed like a dark, uncharted territory. I spent most days in a routine that was both a comfort and a reminder of my solitude. The small joys of pregnancy, which I had once imagined sharing with David, were now moments I experienced in solitude. One afternoon, my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, knocked on my door. She was an elderly lady, always with a kind word and a keen interest in the lives of those around her. "Emma, dear, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you holding up?" Her voice was laced with genuine concern. I forced a smile, not wanting to burden her with my troubles. "I'm okay, Mrs. Jenkins. Just taking each day as it comes." She peered at me closely, her eyes sharp despite her age. "You know, you can talk to me. I've seen a thing or two in my time." I sighed, the weight of my situation suddenly feeling too heavy to bear alone. "It's just hard, you know? David and we're not together anymore. And this baby." My voice trailed off, choked by emotion. Mrs. Jenkins reached out, her hand warm on mine. "Life throws us curveballs, dear. But remember, you're stronger than you think. This little one," she patted my belly gently, "is lucky to have a mom like you." Her words, simple and sincere, were a balm to my weary soul. In that moment, I felt a flicker of strength reignite within me. As the days turned into weeks, I started to adjust to my new life. I realized that I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the little life growing inside me. I began to read books on pregnancy and parenting, immersing myself in learning everything I could about being a good mother. One evening, as I sat flipping through a baby care book, my phone rang. It was a call from my old friend Lisa, whom I hadn't spoken to in months. "Emma, I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" Lisa's voice was filled with worry. I took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "I'm managing, Lisa. It's not easy, but I'm getting through it. Listen, if you need anything at all, just let me know. I'm here for you," she said earnestly. Her offer of support was a reminder that I wasn't entirely alone in this. There were people who cared, who were willing to stand by me. "Thanks, Lisa. That means a lot," I replied, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. As I hung up the phone, I realized that even in the darkest of times, there were glimmers of hope and kindness. I might have been on my own, but I wasn't entirely alone. With each passing day, I grew more resilient, more determined to face whatever lay ahead. The stillness of my apartment was broken by the piercing ring of the phone. David's name flashed on the screen, a name I hadn't seen in months. With a mixture of apprehension and annoyance, I answered. "Emma, it's David," his voice sounded oddly nonchalant. "The housewarming for my parents is coming up. They're all settled in the new place." His casual tone set me on edge. "Why would I care about that, David?" "Well, I thought you'd sorted things out, with the pregnancy," he said, implying I had an abortion. His assumption boiled my blood, but I held my tongue, letting him believe his narrative. So, what do you want? I was thinking you could come. Show some goodwill, maybe bring a gift. It's the least you could do, after the mess, he added, as if it was a simple request. His audacity was astounding. But a part of me knew this was a chance to face this head-on, to put an end to this chapter. Fine, I'll be there, I said, a plan forming in my mind. On the day of the housewarming, I stood outside their opulent new house, my 8-month pregnant belly prominent. Taking a deep breath, I walked in. David was by the door, and his face went pale as he saw my belly. You are. I thought you. You thought wrong, I cut him off sharply, my voice edged with steel. The house was filled with their friends and family. As I moved through the crowd, whispers followed me like shadows. Joan, David's mother, approached with a look of utter shock. Emma, you're still. But we assumed that I'd get rid of my baby? No, Joan. I kept my child, I said firmly, meeting her gaze. David, recovering from his shock, came to us. Emma, this isn't the time or the place. It's the perfect time and place, David. Everyone should know. I didn't get an abortion. I'm still pregnant, I raised my voice, making sure it carried across the room. The room fell into a stunned silence. Guests stared, some with open mouths, others with veiled curiosity. David and his parents looked as if the ground had fallen away beneath them. But I didn't leave. I stood there, amidst the shock and whispers, my presence an unspoken challenge. As the evening wore on, I held my ground. Conversations resumed around me, but the air was thick with tension. David and his parents tried to avoid me, but there was no escaping the truth I represented in their midst. When David's boss, a man I knew only in passing, approached with a puzzled look, I didn't back down. Emma, I didn't expect to see you here, especially like this. Like what? Pregnant and alone because David couldn't handle it? I retorted, my words sharp but true. David hurried over, his face a mask of embarrassment. Emma, please, let's not do this here. Why not, David? Your family, your friends, they should know the kind of man you are. The kind of family you come from, I said, my voice laced with bitterness. The party continued around us, but the facade had crumbled. I stayed, making my point with my mere presence. I was a living testament to their false assumptions and broken promises. As the evening drew to a close, I left the house, my head held high. I had faced them all, spoken my truth, and stood my ground. It was a declaration of my strength, my refusal to be silenced or shamed. The days following the housewarming party were a whirlwind of emotions. I had made my stand, revealed my truth in the most public way I could have imagined. The fallout was immediate and intense. I was at my apartment, still processing the events of that night, when my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Lisa, a close friend and one of the few people I still kept in touch with. Hey, Emma. Just heard about the party. Are you okay? Her message read. I sighed, typing out a response. Yeah, I'm fine. It was tough, but I had to do it. My phone rang almost immediately, Lisa's name flashing on the screen. Emma, you can't just drop a bomb like that and say you're fine. Tell me everything. Her concern was touching, and in that moment, I needed to talk to someone who genuinely cared. It was a mess, Lisa. I showed up, and David and his parents were shocked. They thought I'd had an abortion. Wow, that's intense. But I'm proud of you for standing up to them, she said, her voice filled with admiration. The conversation with Lisa was a much-needed relief, but it couldn't erase the reality of my situation. David's parents, and David himself, had been under the impression that I would just quietly fade away, that I wouldn't dare disrupt their perfect little celebration with the truth of their son's actions. A few days later, I received a call from someone unexpected, David's boss, Mr. Henderson. He had always been cordial to me at company events, but we were hardly acquaintances. Emma, this is Frank Henderson. I was at the party, and I was surprised by what I heard, he said, his voice uneasy. I'm sure you were. I'm sure a lot of people were, I replied, my tone guarded. I just wanted to say, if there's anything you need, any help at work or anything, just let me know. I had no idea about what David had done, he offered. His offer was unexpected, and it gave me a slight pause. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I appreciate that. The call ended on a polite note, but it left me thinking. David's actions, and the subsequent reveal at the party, had wider implications than I had anticipated. People were talking, taking sides, and in the middle of it all was me, still trying to navigate my way through this chaos. The decision to file for divorce was not just a choice, it was a necessity. I couldn't let David and his actions go unpunished. The emotional turmoil he put me through, especially with his demands for an abortion, was unforgivable. I was ready to fight for my rights, for my unborn child's future, and for what was morally just. Sitting across from my lawyer, Mr. Jenkins, I explained my decision. I want to file for divorce. I need alimony for our child, and I want a majority of his assets. He also pushed me for an abortion. That's emotional abuse, and I won't let it slide. Mr. Jenkins, a no-nonsense man with a keen legal mind, nodded. Do you have any proof of these demands for an abortion, Emma? I pulled out my phone, where I had saved the recording of that fateful conversation with David. I recorded it. He didn't know, but I did. It was the only way I knew how to protect myself. Mr. Jenkins listened to the recording, his expression hardening. This is good, Emma. This will be key in court. The day of the court hearing was a storm of emotions. I sat there, heavily pregnant, facing the man I once loved, now my adversary. David looked confident, perhaps believing that the system would favor him. When it was my turn to present my case, Mr. Jenkins played the recording. David's voice filled the room, cold and clear, demanding an abortion. You could feel the shock in the courtroom. David's face turned red with anger. You recorded me? That's low, Emma. You won't prove anything with that. I looked him straight in the eyes, my voice steady but filled with emotion. I recorded it because I knew this day would come. Because I knew no one would believe me otherwise. You wanted me to get rid of our baby, David. The court needs to know the truth. His lawyer tried to object, to discredit the recording, but the damage was done. The judge listened intently, his expression growing graver by the minute. After both sides presented their cases, the judge delivered his verdict. The court rules in favor of Ms. Emma. The evidence of emotional abuse is clear and compelling. Mr. David is ordered to pay alimony and a majority of his assets as compensation. David stood there, stunned, as the judge announced the verdict. He turned to me, his face a mixture of anger and disbelief. You've ruined me, Emma. I hope you're happy. I looked back at him, feeling a surge of vindication. This isn't about revenge, David. It's about justice. For me, and for our child. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a burden lift off my shoulders. It had been a tough battle, but I had won. More importantly, I had stood up for myself and my child. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Sitting in the small, cozy nursery I had prepared in my apartment, I cradled my newborn son, Aiden, in my arms. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine, a symbol of a new bond, a new life. The struggles of the past months seemed to melt away in his innocent gaze. My friend Lisa came by to visit, her face beaming as she saw Aiden. He's gorgeous, Emma. You did it. You're a mom now. I smiled, feeling a mix of exhaustion and elation. Yeah, I am. It's still sinking in. Lisa sat beside me, her eyes softening as she looked at Aiden. How are you holding up? After everything? I sighed, looking down at my son. It's been tough, Lisa. But looking at him, I know it was all worth it. He's my little miracle. As we chatted, the topic of David inevitably came up. Have you heard from him since the court ruling? Lisa asked, a hint of concern in her voice. I shook my head. No, and I don't expect to. He's paying the alimony, that's all that matters now. Aiden and we're moving on. The conversation drifted to plans for the future. I talked about my hopes for Aiden, for us. Despite the hardships, I felt a sense of optimism, a belief that we could make it. A few days later, I took Aiden for a walk in the park. The fresh air and the sound of children playing around us felt like a balm to my soul. As I pushed the stroller, an elderly woman stopped me. He's a beautiful baby, dear, she said, smiling warmly at Aiden. Thank you, I replied, feeling a surge of pride. Treasure these moments, they grow up so fast, she advised, her eyes twinkling with wisdom. I nodded, knowing she was right. I will. Every single moment. Walking back home, I thought about the journey I had been on. The pain, the betrayal, the fight for justice, and now, the joy of motherhood. It hadn't been an easy path, but it had led me here, to a new beginning with my son.
I never imagined I'd be writing this story, let alone living it. But life has a way of throwing curveballs that knock you flat on your back, and my pitch came one rainy Tuesday morning, 12 years ago. That's when I lost Mike, my husband, and my daughter Amy's father. The police officer's words still echo in my head sometimes. Mrs. Thompson, there's been an accident. A drunk driver had run a red light, they said. Mike never had a chance. I'm Karen, and at 32, I became a widow with a 9-year-old daughter to raise. The first few weeks passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, casseroles from neighbors, and trying to explain to Amy why Daddy wasn't coming home. The financial reality hit hard and fast. Even with Mike's life insurance, keeping up with the utilities and house bills in our home, the one I'd inherited from my grandmother before we got married, wasn't easy. I'd been working part-time as a project coordinator, but suddenly that wasn't enough. Thank God for Mike's parents, Sarah and Robert. They stepped in like angels when I was drowning in grief and responsibilities. I remember the first time Sarah showed up at our door with groceries and Amy's school supplies. Karen, honey, she said, hugging me tight, you're not alone in this. You're still our daughter, and we're here for both of you. Robert would pick Amy up from school 3 days a week, helping her with homework while I worked extra hours. They'd slip me money whenever they could, though I always felt guilty taking it. You need to think about yourself too, Sarah would say during our Sunday dinners. You're still young, Karen. Maybe dating. But I'd shake my head before she could finish. I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. The truth was, Mike wasn't just my husband, he was my high school sweetheart, my first and only love. The thought of replacing him felt like betraying his memory. Instead, I threw myself into being both mother and father to Amy. We developed our own little routines, Saturday morning pancakes, homework sessions at the kitchen table, and bedtime stories where we'd make up adventures about a brave princess who looked suspiciously like Amy. But late at night, when Amy was asleep, I'd sit in my bedroom, looking at old photos and wondering if I was doing enough. The house felt so empty without Mike's loud laugh, his horrible singing in the shower, even his socks that never quite made it to the hamper. As Amy entered her teenage years, I found myself at a crossroads in my career. My boss, Linda, called me into her office one spring morning. Karen, we've got some challenging projects coming up. Higher stakes, bigger budgets. I think you're ready for them. She slid a folder across her desk. It'll mean some travel, though. I hesitated, thinking of Amy. I don't know, Linda, my daughter. Your in-laws are still around, right? She leaned forward. Karen, your daughter's 13 now. It's time you started thinking about your career too. The projects were challenging, but exhilarating. Each successful completion brought new opportunities, and my income grew steadily. I still remember Amy's face when I came home from my first business trip. "Mom, you look different," she said, studying me. "More. I don't know, alive?" She was right. I felt alive again, not just surviving, but thriving. The years flew by in a blur of project deadlines, parent-teacher conferences, and weekend visits with the in-laws. Before I knew it, Amy was graduating high school. "Mom, I got in," she screamed over the phone one day. "University of Michigan. Can you believe it?" My heart sank and soared simultaneously. Michigan was 3 states away, but Amy's voice was so full of excitement. "That's wonderful, sweetie. We'll make it work." The day we dropped her off at college, I cried all the way home. But then something unexpected happened. I started to enjoy the quiet. For the first time in years, I could focus on myself. I cut back my hours at work, hired a contractor to renovate the kitchen I'd been complaining about for years, and planted the garden I'd always dreamed of. Amy and I kept in touch through regular Skype calls. "Mom, you won't believe what happened in chemistry today," or "Mom, the cafeteria food is terrible." I watched through my computer screen as my little girl grew into a competent young woman. Her graduation day was perfect, sunny, but not too hot. Sarah and Robert sat beside me, all of us beaming with pride as Amy crossed the stage. "I'm staying here, Mom," she announced over dinner that evening. "I've got a job offer at a marketing firm." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. But maybe this was better. She was building her own life, just as I had built mine. 2 years later, Amy showed up on my doorstep with a tall, handsome man named James. "Mom, we're getting engaged," she squealed, flashing a diamond ring. I was ecstatic. Robert and I immediately offered to help with the wedding expenses. But as the plans grew more elaborate, so did the costs. Each week brought new requests: designer dress, luxury venue, exotic flowers, premium catering. "Honey," I said gently one evening during a particularly expensive cake tasting, "maybe we should consider something a bit more modest?" Amy's eyes immediately welled up with tears. "But Mom, you should see Melissa's wedding photos on Instagram. And Rachel's reception was in that beautiful vineyard. I can't be the only one with a basic wedding." I looked at my daughter's pleading face and felt my resolve crumble. What was money compared to her happiness? So I dipped into my savings again, and the wedding was everything she'd dreamed of: a fairy tale celebration in Michigan complete with ice sculptures and a 7-tier cake. After the extravaganza of Amy's wedding, my bank account needed recovery time, and honestly, so did I. The house felt serene again, and I settled back into my routine. Then, 6 months after the wedding, Amy called. "Mom, we're coming to visit this weekend. We have something exciting to discuss." That Sunday morning, I was making coffee when they arrived. "Mom, you won't believe what we're planning," Amy exclaimed, settling onto our kitchen bar stool. Her eyes were sparkling with that same look she used to get when asking for a new toy as a child. "We're going to open our own business," James announced proudly. "An auto parts store." I poured them coffee, nodding encouragingly. "That's interesting. Tell me more about your plans." "Well," Amy leaned forward, "we found the perfect location. It's in a great area with lots of traffic. We just need some startup capital." When Amy named the figure, I literally choked on my coffee, splattering some onto the counter. "You're joking, right?" "Mom, it's a solid investment." Amy's voice took on that wheedling tone I remembered from her teenage years. "The location alone." "Have you done any market research?" I interrupted, wiping up the spilled coffee. "What's your business plan?" "We don't need all that." Amy waved her hand dismissively. "Mom, we know what we're doing. I have a business degree, remember?" "A marketing degree," I corrected. "And James, what's your experience with auto parts?" "I've always been interested in cars," he mumbled. "Look," Amy's voice hardened, "I'm your only heir. Everything you have will be mine eventually anyway. Why not help me now when I actually need it?" The coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. I slowly set it down, feeling a cold anger I'd never experienced before with my daughter. "First of all," I said carefully, measuring each word, "being my heir doesn't entitle you to my money while I'm alive. Second, I haven't seen a single piece of paper showing me this is a viable business. No market analysis, no financial projections, nothing." "Come on, James," Amy grabbed her purse. "We're leaving." Obviously, Mom cares more about her money than her only daughter's happiness. They stormed out, the door slamming behind them. I sat there for a long time, staring at their untouched coffee cups. Weeks passed without a word from Amy. Then I saw it on Facebook, photos of a storefront with a grand opening banner. "Dreams do come true," Amy's post read. "So grateful we could secure a business loan to make this happen. Entrepreneurs, business owners." More posts followed, Amy behind the counter, James arranging displays, both of them smiling in front of fully stocked shelves. Then came the vacation photos, Amy and James on a Hawaiian beach, cocktails in hand. When hard work pays off. Business success, living our best life. Then the tone of the post started to change. The photos became less flashy, the captions less boastful. Business photos disappeared entirely, replaced by vague inspirational quotes about learning from challenges and staying strong through storms. Finally, 6 months after their grand opening, Amy posted a long message: "Life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes you have to know when to close one door so another can open. Today we're announcing the closure of Thompson Auto Parts. Thank you to all our customers who supported us on this journey. New beginnings, life lessons." The doorbell rang on a chilly October evening. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I muted the TV and approached cautiously. Through the peephole, I saw Amy and James, looking nothing like the confident entrepreneurs from their Hawaii photos. When I opened the door, Amy burst into tears. James stood behind her, staring at his shoes. "Mom," Amy's voice cracked. "We need help. We lost everything," James finally spoke. "The business loan, we can't even make rent anymore." Over cups of hot tea, they laid out their situation. The business loan was massive, their credit was destroyed, and they couldn't afford even a basic apartment. They'd been staying with friends, bouncing between couches. Could we stay here for a while?" Amy asked, her voice small. "Just until we get back on our feet." I took a deep breath. "Yes, but we need to set some ground rules." They nodded eagerly, relief washing over their faces. I helped them move into the guest room the next day, and our new life began. I started taking on extra projects at work, knowing I had 2 more mouths to feed. My usual 8-hour days stretched into 10, sometimes 12. Both Amy and James found jobs. She had a local marketing firm, he had an auto repair shop, but their salaries barely covered their loan payments. To my surprise, Amy stepped up at home. She'd have dinner ready when I got home late, the kitchen clean and tidy. For a while, it seemed to work. We fell into a routine, James and Amy leaving early for their jobs, me working late, coming home to a warm meal and a clean house. Then Linda, my boss of 15 years, called me into her office. "Karen, I'm leaving the company," she said without preamble. "I wanted you to hear it from me first. The new director starts next week. Between us, he's got his own way of doing things. Be careful." She was right. The new director, Mr. Peterson, swept in like a cold wind. Suddenly there were new procedures, new reporting structures, new faces in management positions. I watched as, one by one, Linda's old team members were either pushed out or left voluntarily. The atmosphere grew tense, with whispered conversations in break rooms and worried glances in hallways. Then, 2 months after Linda left, I got the email, "Please see Mr. Peterson at 2 p.m. I knew before I even sat down in his chrome and leather office. The rehearsed speech, the fake sympathy in his voice, I'd seen it all before, just never from this side of the desk. "We're restructuring the department," he said smoothly. "Your position has been eliminated." I sat there, numb, thinking about Amy and James at home, about the increased grocery bills, about the utilities that had doubled since they moved in. how was I going to tell them? That evening, I sat at our kitchen table, still in my work clothes, staring at my hands. Amy and James were across from me, their dinner plates pushed aside. "I've been let go," I said quietly. "The new director, he's restructuring the department." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked up to catch them exchanging a quick glance. Was that panic in their eyes? That night, I lay awake making plans. First order of business, budget cuts. No more takeout, no more premium brands, no more extras. We'd need to tighten our belts until I found new employment. The first signs of trouble appeared at breakfast 2 weeks later. Amy stared at the store-brand cereal box like it had personally offended her. "Really, Mom? What happened to the good stuff?" "We need to be careful with money right now," I explained. "It's temporary." James pushed his bowl away. "I can't eat this. It tastes like cardboard." That evening, I made a simple casserole instead of ordering our usual Friday night Chinese. Amy took one bite and dropped her fork with a clatter. "This is what we're eating now?" She looked at James. "Honey, maybe we should just grab something on our way home tomorrow." "You're welcome to buy your own groceries," I said evenly. The atmosphere in the house changed after that. Instead of coming home to cooked meals, I found dirty dishes in the sink and empty takeout containers in the trash. Clearly, they were buying their own food now. One evening, as I was cooking dinner for myself, Amy leaned against the counter. "You know, Mom, it's kind of weird having you home all the time," she said. "James and I used to have the house to ourselves in the evenings." I turned from the stove. "This is my house, Amy." "Yeah, but..." She waved her hand vaguely. "Don't you have job applications to do or something?" The criticisms became constant. If I cleaned, I was moving their things. If I watched TV in the living room, I was always around. If I cooked, the smell was overwhelming. Then came that Wednesday afternoon. I was heading to the laundry room when I heard whispers from the guest bedroom. I shouldn't have stopped, shouldn't have listened, but something in their tone made me pause. "We need to figure out how to get her out," James was saying. "She's just sitting around all day, eating our food." "I know," Amy replied. "She's become such a freeloader. At least when she was working, she was useful." I stood there, frozen, my laundry basket pressing against my hip. My own daughter, plotting to push me out of my own house. The same house where I'd raised her, where I'd held her through thunderstorms and teenage heartbreaks, where I'd kept her safe after losing her father. Quietly, I turned and walked back to my room. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I sat at my desk and powered up my phone's voice recorder app. Something told me I might need evidence of their conversations. The tension finally broke over a pot roast dinner I'd made. Amy pushed her plate away and cleared her throat dramatically. "Mom, we need to talk about the living situation," she announced, exchanging glances with James. "We've been thinking. It's just that, well, James and I are working, and you're..." She paused, choosing her words, "not contributing right now." James nodded encouragingly at her. "Maybe it would be better if you stayed with Grandma and Grandpa for a while," Amy continued, her voice sickly sweet. "They have that spare room, and we could handle things here." I stared at my daughter, barely recognizing the person she'd become. "Let me be very clear. This is my house. I took you both in when you had nowhere to go. If you're unhappy with the arrangement, you're welcome to leave." Amy's face flushed red. "You're being selfish," she shouted, shoving back from the table. "We're family. We're supposed to help each other." "Yes, we are," I agreed quietly. "Funny how you only remember that when you need something from me." She stormed off to her room, James trailing behind her like a shadow. After that night, the house became a war zone of silence. They started buying their own groceries, labeling everything in the fridge with passive-aggressive sticky notes. Amy and James only, "do not touch." "I'm not feeding a freeloader," Amy would announce loudly whenever she cooked, making sure I could hear from the next room. "Some people should learn to support themselves." I said nothing. Instead, I kept my phone handy, recording their cruel comments and whispered plots. The evidence was building, though I wasn't sure yet what I'd do with it. Then, during one of my morning walks 2 weeks later, the only peace I found these days, my phone rang. It was Linda, my former boss. "Karen, got a minute? I've started my own consulting firm. Listen, I need a chief project manager, and you're the only person I trust for the job. Interested?" My heart skipped a beat. "What's the salary range?" When she named the figure, I had to sit down on a nearby bench. It was substantially more than my previous position. "We need someone to start immediately," Linda continued. "The office is all set up. Can you come by tomorrow morning?" "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "Yes, I can." I didn't breathe a word to Amy or James that evening. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my best suit and drove to the address Linda had given me. The office was beautiful, all glass and modern furnishings. Linda greeted me with a hug and showed me to my new office. My office. With a window view and my name on the door. "Welcome aboard," she smiled, handing me the contract. I signed immediately, my hand steady and sure. Driving home that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. An hour later, I stood on my own front porch, key in hand, staring at the lock in disbelief. They'd actually changed the locks. My hand trembled as I knocked on the door. The door opened, and there they stood, Amy and James, blocking the entrance like bouncers at a club. "You're not welcome here anymore," Amy said coldly. "We've had enough of your freeloading." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Freeloading? In my own house?" "Your house?" James scoffed. "You don't contribute anything anymore. You just sit around all day while we work." "Amy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "have you forgotten that I took you in when your business failed? When you had nothing?" She shrugged, and the gesture was so dismissive it made my heart ache. "Yeah, well, that was different. You had money then, so you were worth respecting. Now?" She looked me up and down. "You're just taking up space." Before I could respond, Amy slammed the door in my face. I stood there, my hand still raised, as if frozen in time. 25 years of motherhood, of sacrifice, of love, and this was what it had come to. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes, 2 officers, one older with graying temples, one younger with kind eyes. I explained the situation, showing them the property documents I thankfully kept in my car. When they rang the doorbell, Amy answered with her sweet, innocent face, the one I'd seen her use countless times to get out of trouble. "Officers, there seems to be a misunderstanding," she began. "Step aside, ma'am," the older officer said firmly. "We need to let the legal owner enter her property." I walked in, my heels clicking on the hardwood floors my grandmother had loved so much. "This is ridiculous." Amy's voice rose. "I have rights. This was my father's house." I pulled out the property deed. "No, Amy. This house was given to me by my grandmother, before I even met your father. It was never his, and it's certainly not yours." But, her face crumpled. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere else." For a moment, I saw my little girl again, the one who'd come to me with scraped knees and broken toys, trusting me to fix everything. But then I remembered the recordings on my phone, the cruel words, the changed locks. "That's not my problem anymore," I said quietly. "You didn't care where I would go when you locked me out. Pack your things and leave." "Mom, please." Amy started crying, but I'd seen this performance before. "Officers," I turned to the police, "could you please ensure they leave the premises?" They nodded, and I stood in my living room, watching as Amy and James stuffed their belongings into suitcases, all while Amy alternated between crying and glaring at me. Finally, they were gone. I locked the door behind them, then immediately picked up my phone. "Hello, yes, I need a locksmith. Emergency service, please. I need all the locks changed tonight." As I waited for the locksmith, I walked through my house, straightening pictures, touching familiar surfaces. My house. My grandmother's house. The one thing I'd never let anyone take from me, not even my own daughter. Life settled into a new rhythm. My job at Linda's company was challenging and rewarding, and I threw myself into the work. Coming home to an empty house wasn't easy, but at least it was peaceful. Then Sarah called. "Karen?" Her voice sounded strained. "We need to talk. Amy and James showed up at our door last night. They're saying horrible things about you. That you cruelly threw them out, that you're selfish." I took a deep breath. "Sarah, there's something you need to hear." I played the recording over the phone. Amy and James's voices came through clearly. "Once your grandparents kick the bucket, we'll get their house too," James was saying. "I know," Amy replied. "They're getting so old now. Hopefully it won't take too long. That neighborhood's worth a fortune." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. 2 days later, Sarah called back. Her voice was stronger this time. "We told them no," she said. "You should have seen Amy's face when we said we knew about their plans for our house. They left in quite a state." "Are you okay?" I asked. "We will be. Robert and we've been talking. We're updating our will. Everything's going to you, Karen. You've been more of a daughter to us than Amy's been a granddaughter." Months passed. I settled into my new position, even earned a company award for a particularly successful project. Then one day, a Facebook message popped up. "Amy. Mom, I heard about your new job. Congratulations. Listen, James and I have been doing a lot of thinking. We realize we behaved terribly. We've changed, I promise. Could we come home? We'll be different this time." I stared at the message for a long time, remembering the little girl who used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, the teenager who rolled her eyes but still kissed me goodnight, the bride who'd looked so beautiful in her wedding dress. But I also remembered the cruel words, the changed locks, the calculated plots against her own grandparents. "Amy," I wrote back, "I don't believe you've changed. I think you've just run out of options. You need to solve your own problems now. I'll always be your mother, but I can't be your safety net anymore." She didn't respond. That was a year ago. Sometimes I drive past places that hold memories, her old school, the park where she learned to ride a bike, the ice cream shop where we celebrated every report card. I wonder if she thinks about those times too. Sarah and Robert come over for Sunday dinners now. We talk about Amy sometimes, wondering where she is, hoping she's okay. They've officially changed their will, as they said they would. "You'll know what's right when the time comes," Sarah told me, squeezing my hand. The truth is, I do still hope for reconciliation someday. Not the quick fix Amy proposed in her message, but a real healing. One based on honest conversations, genuine remorse, and true change. Until then, I focus on my work, tend to my garden, and care for Sarah and Robert as they cared for me all those years ago. "Eliza, you gotta keep it on the down low, babe," Brian said with those puppy dog eyes drilling into me. "Let's just say you're a sales clerk or something chill like that, yeah?" I could tell he was serious, but still, the request rang strange in my ears. "A clerk? Brian, you've seen my business degree framed on the wall, right?" "Totally," he chuckled, scratching the back of his neck. "But my mom's, she's special, you know? Don't want her making a fuss or something." I raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "All right, for you, I'll be the world's best sales clerk," I said with a laugh, not realizing then that fabricating this tiny piece of my reality for his parents would unfold into something ugly and hard to handle. Soon enough, we rolled up to his folks' place. It was your typical suburbia, well, if every house looked like it could be on the cover of a homestyle mag, that is. Brian rang the bell, giving my hand a quick squeeze before the door swung open. And there she was, Linda, all coiffed hair and a smile that was a little too, let's just say she wouldn't have been out of place as a game show host. "Well, look at you," she appraised as she ushered us in. Brian says you're in retail? I plastered on my best customer service smile. Yeah, just selling clothes in a shop downtown, I said casually. Retail, huh? Linda eyed me up and down, her smile barely flinching, like she's heard better jokes at a funeral. I supposed you didn't feel like aiming higher? Brian shot me a play-along glance. Nah, she loves it, he jumped in quickly. She loves it, Linda echoed, as if tasting the words. Right. Then she floated away, leaving a silence that felt like standing in a room after someone's just slammed a door. Later, when Linda went to powder her nose or count her coins or whatever, Brian found me in their living room, which was too clean, like no one really lived there. He had this "I ate something bad" look as he spilled the family tea. He told me all about Linda's thing for the slot machines, the way she borrows money faster than a bank can print it. She'd bled his dad dry and was always circling Brian for a handout like it was a national sport. We talking a little gambling fun or full-on Vegas blowout? I asked him, trying to sort the scale of what we were dealing with. He grimaced. Professional league. She's up to her eyeballs in it. If there's a machine with blinking lights, she's there, batting her eyelashes at it. The wedding, if you could even call it that, was as low frills as a diner breakfast. We figured why blow cash on just one day when we're aiming for a lifetime. Not that I had any illusions about Linda seeing eye to eye with me on that. In our backyard, dressed up but not overdone, Brian looked nervous but happy. I kept things as chill as I could, in jeans and a nice blouse, because why not? Linda, on the other hand, turned up looking like she just lost a bet, wearing a dress that screamed I would rather be anywhere but here. The rest of the shindig passed without much drama. Friends joked, the grill sizzled, and life felt almost normal for a hot second. Aunt Marcy was on music, hooking up an old boombox that squealed before it sang. Our first dance was to a song that skipped a few times, but Brian and I just laughed it off and kept on dancing. It wasn't until everyone had had their fill of burgers and cake that the real fun began. Linda dug in true Linda fashion, not on food, but us, again. She found me, her eyes a little glassy from the party favors. You know, Eliza, marrying into this family means you're part of the clan now. I nodded, that's usually how it goes. And clans stick together. You never know when one of us might be in a bind. That's what families do. Help each other. The not-so-subtle hint in her voice was thicker than the icing on our cheap but tasty cake. I caught on quick. Sure, families help, but we also just made it clear we're saving up for other stuff, remember? Her smile was a thin line. Just saying, a penny saved today might be a penny needed tomorrow. By any one of us. Brian swung by then, slinging an arm around me. And any penny we save is staying with us, for our future, isn't that right, babe? Nailed it, I said, high-fiving him. With arms linked, we wandered off, leaving Linda to stew in the middle of a party that was everything she didn't want. She didn't dance after that, instead sat like a queen in exile, sipping and watching, but thankfully keeping her money thoughts to herself. It was maybe 2 weeks into this whole married gig when Linda turned our twosome into a crowd. Without fail, every payday, she'd be waiting outside the office where Brian worked, hanging around like a bad habit. One of those afternoons, I swing by to take Brian out for lunch. And there she is, leaning on the hood of her car, tapping her foot like she's on stage keeping time for a rock band. We hadn't even made it back to our car when she met us halfway, her voice rising above the sounds of the city like a siren. There you are. I've been waiting half an hour, Brian. We need to talk. Brian's usually the calm type, but I saw that jaw clench. Mom, not now. I'm on break, and we've got plans. She wasn't one to be sidelined though. This is more important than your plans. I've got bills to pay, and since we're family now. I had to jump in, couldn't help it. Hold up, Linda. We talked about this. We're not your personal ATM. Her gaze snapped to me, sharp as a tack. Listen, girl, you married into this. you've got a duty now." Brian stepped between us, trying to keep the peace. "Mom, you've gotta stop doing this. It's not fair to us, or you. There's people that can help with." Linda's laugh cut him off, low and mean. "Help? I don't need help, I need money. And my son's not gonna leave his mother out to dry." "People are staring, Linda. This ain't the place," I said, my voice steady but firm, wishing I could just pull Brian away. But Linda was on a roll. "Fine. I'll be by the house later, and we can sort this out. Don't make me wait, Brian," she warned, poking him hard in the chest before she turned on her heel and strutted off. At the sandwich shop, we grabbed a corner booth and tried to shake off the Linda encounter. Brian was rubbing his temples, looking like he could use something stronger than a soda. I reached over, my fingers bumping his. "Babe, maybe it's time to cut the cord. She's walking all over us." He sighed, heavy and long, like he was deflating. I know. It's just not easy, Eliza. She's always been this way." The rest of lunch was us making plans, figuring out how to tackle the Linda issue without a blowout. By the time we got back to work, we had the makings of a game plan, or at least the start of one. That evening, as predicted, Linda was banging on our front door like it owed her money. When we let her in, she wasted no time. "I don't have all night," she snapped, dropping her purse on our kitchen table like she owned the place. "Mom, we can't keep doing this," Brian started, but she bulldozed right over him. "Can't or won't," she challenged, eyeing me as if I was holding the strings to Brian's wallet. "It's not healthy, for any of us," I came back at her, trying to keep my cool. She squared her shoulders, ready for a fight. "Healthy? What's healthy is a roof over my head and food on my plate. And we've been helping with that," Brian said, a bit of steel finally in his voice. "But this is it, the last time. We're saving up, you know that." Linda's eyes narrowed, and she let out a hiss of disbelief. "The last time, huh? Don't make promises you can't keep, boy." "Enough," Brian snapped, surprising us both. "You get help, Mom, or this is it." We didn't give her the money that night. It felt like a victory, small but mighty. Linda left in a huff, the door slamming behind her like the finale of a thunderstorm. Brian's phone buzzed off the table just as we were getting ready to call it a night. It was the kind of call that drains the color from your face. Tom, Brian's dad and Linda's husband, had landed himself in the hospital. His heart had decided to pull a fast one on him. "Jesus," Brian cursed under his breath, fumbling with his keys. We bolted out the door before the echo of our slamming door had time to fade. The harsh lights of the hospital were a stark change to our dim cozy living room. I could see Brian's chest heaving as we made our way to the front desk. The lady there pointed us to the right wing with a bored expression like she'd seen it all before. We found Tom in the ICU, hooked up to more beeps and blips than a video game arcade. Seeing him like that, all wires and tubes, it got to Brian. I saw his eyes water, his hands shake. "Dad," he choked out, gripping the railing of the hospital bed. Tom's eyes were closed, but they fluttered like he heard us. I put a hand on Brian's back, no words, because what could I say? It's then, watching the rise and fall of Tom's chest, that Brian turns to me, his voice a low tremble. "Where's Mom?" "Good question." I pull out my phone and gave Linda a call. No answer. So I tried again. And again. When she finally picked up, the noise in the background wasn't the beep of hospital machines, it was the clatter of a slot machine. "Linda?" I said, my voice almost as brittle as the hospital sheets. "Tom's had a heart attack. We're at the hospital." There's a pause, a cash register's ring, cutting through. "Yeah? And you should be here." Brian grabbed the phone from me, nearly shouting. "Your husband's lying in a damn hospital bed." She sighed like we were discussing the weather. "Tell him I'll pop by in the morning. I'm busy right now, cashing in some stuff." I could see the muscles in Brian's jaw jump. He threw the phone back at me, storming off to find a doctor or maybe just to punch a wall where no one could see. That night and into the morning, Tom got a bit better, but Linda never showed. The doc said it was a warning sign that he could have another attack if he didn't slow down. We went home exhausted, the morning sun stinging our eyes. Walking in, it was like a burglary, only Linda wasn't taking TVs or jewelry. No, she was packing up Tom's vinyl collection, the one thing he loved more than anything. "What the hell are you doing, Mom?" Brian stormed into the room, looking like he was ready to explode. "These are worth something," she snapped without looking up. "Don't worry, Tom won't miss them. Besides, hospital bills, remember?" "Hospital bills?" Brian was fuming. "That's rich, coming from you. You didn't even go see him." She rolled her eyes, stopped packing for a split second to stare Brian down. "Look, your father's tough, he'll be fine. But these bills ain't gonna pay themselves." But Brian was having none of it. "Put them back, Mom. Now." He moved towards her, his hands balled into fists. Linda stared him down, met his anger with a sneer. "Make me." I stepped between them. "Enough," I said, my voice steady. "Just stop. Dad needs us to be a family right now." The tension could have been cut with a knife. Linda looked from me to Brian, shrugged, and tossed the record she was holding back into the box. What she said next was like a punch to the gut. "Family sticks together, right? But when it's convenient for you too, huh?" She left without another word. The sound of the door closing behind her was the only goodbye. I looked at Brian, at the mess in the room. "She doesn't get it," I whispered. "She really doesn't get it." He didn't have an answer. We cleaned up in silence, Tom's records settling back onto their shelves like old friends coming home. The news hit us like a rogue wave. Tom was gone, just like that. The world had the nerve to keep spinning, the sun to keep rising and setting, as if nothing had shifted beneath our feet. Brian was numb, you could see it in the way he moved, like somebody had filled his shoes with lead. We did what people do in these times. Made calls, arranged for a funeral, picked a casket, a dark, polished thing that seemed too grand for Tom, who'd never cared for flash. The house was a mess of flowers and sympathy cards, the air thick with the smell of lilies and the sound of muttered condolences. Linda was nowhere. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air, her presence erased from our immediate reality. People asked about her, of course. "Families always hit the hardest," they'd say, nodding like that explained everything. Days passed, and she was still MIA. Brian had stopped asking after her. Stopped wanting to hear her excuses or lies. Then, the funeral. I expected her to be there at least, to show her face, say her goodbyes. But she was a no-show. "Hello," was all Brian said, looking at the empty seat next to him reserved for his mom, the word echoing in the quiet of the chapel. The service came and went. Linda's absence was the elephant in the room, a constant undercurrent to every conversation. A mother should be there, crying, holding on to memories of better days, not this. It was maybe a week after, I ran into Linda at the grocery store. If you could call it running into her. She was at the end of an aisle, dressed to the nines, a grin on her face like she'd won the lottery. "Look at you," I greeted, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She swiveled around, that grin never fading. "Well, if it isn't the grieving widow. Lighten up, will ya? It's not the end of the world." My fists clenched at my sides, but I stood my ground. "You didn't even come to the funeral, Linda. How could you?" She shrugged, her jewelry clinking with the motion. "What's the point? Sobbing over a hole in the ground? That's not for me. Besides, Tom left a tidy sum. I'm rich at last." I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the dirty glares from other shoppers. "How can you be so cold? Brian's a big boy. He'll get over it." She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Everyone does. That man loved you till his last breath, I shot back, my voice shaking now. Linda just laughed. Love, love. In the end, it's money that keeps you warm at night. I could feel people watching, feel the scene we were making. It took everything in me not to scream at her. So, I turned on my heel and walked away, the sound of her cackles following me like a bad taste in my mouth. As the automatic doors closed behind me, shutting out the noise, I gripped the handle of my cart so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to remind myself, Tom's memory deserved better than this, better than her. The sun was barely up, and there was a wild knocking at the door that could wake the dead. I was sipping my first coffee of the day when Brian's mom, Linda, came crashing into the kitchen like a whirlwind in a thrift store dress. Her hair was every which way, and her eyes were wild. "Everything's gone," she hollered right off the bat, like we were in the middle of a fight we didn't know we had. "Tom left me with nothing but a pile of debts." Brian, who'd been halfway through a bowl of cereal, dropped his spoon and it clattered loudly. "What the hell, Mom? No money, no nothing. Just bills and more bills." Linda was waving her arms now, papers flying from her hands like panicked birds. It would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. Then she fixed her eyes on Brian like he was some ATM. "You gotta give me your dad's watch and that fancy ring he had. They're worth a fortune." Brian's face went rock hard. "Dad's buried with his watch and ring, Mom. You know that. He wanted it that way." That stopped her, for a microsecond. "Well, dig him up then." The words came out of her mouth so fast you'd think she'd said, "Please, and thank you, and by your leave." "Nah, ain't happening." Brian shook his head, leaning back in his chair as if he needed the distance. "They're staying with Dad. End of story." Linda looked like she'd been slapped. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whipped around with her coat flapping behind her like dark wings. She was out the door before we could say another word. It wasn't even light out yet when the knock came. I knew it wasn't good. Cops don't do house calls at the crack of dawn to share a cup of joe. I was barely awake, struggling to make sense of the two uniforms and serious badges at my door. Brian stood behind me, boxers and bedhead, rubbing his eyes like he could wipe away this bad dream. "Brian and, sorry, ma'am, your name?" the taller one asked. "I'm Eliza," I managed, my voice gravelly with sleep. "You folks know a Linda Harrison?" The cop had that cop look, not quite suspicious, not quite sorry. Brian nodded, shoved his hands in his hair. "Yeah, my mom." "What's she done this time?" "She's been arrested," the officer said, and his partner handed us a slip of paper. "Caught trying to dig up her late husband's grave." Brian cussed under his breath, a stream of words that would make a sailor blush. "I'll put some pants on," he grumbled. We were down at the station, faster than I'd like, the kind of place you never want to be. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the coffee from a machine too weak. Linda was sitting there, her pride fighting with the dirt on her clothes. The sight would have been comical if it weren't so damn sad. "What the hell, Mom?" Brian threw his hands up as we approached the bars. "Don't you what the hell me, Brian," Linda shot back, fire in her eyes. "I did what I had to do." "You tried to rob Dad's grave, Mom." Brian's voice was a tight wire about to snap. "That watch would have paid off everything," she hissed back, gripping the cell bars like they were the only thing holding her upright. "And what? You didn't think about us, huh?" Brian towered over her, all muscle and anger. I put a hand on his arm, could feel the coiled tension like a live wire. Let's talk this out." "There's nothing to talk out," Linda spat. "I don't expect you to understand. Not until you hit rock bottom, too." "Linda, this ain't rock bottom. This is digging a hole straight to hell," I said, my own anger flaring. The ride home was silent. We knew the day would come when we'd hear from Linda again. That's the thing with debt, it's like a zombie. You think it's dead, but it can come back with a vengeance. But for now, we'd leave the dead to their sleep and the living to their mistakes. We had a life to live, and no amount of digging would change our course. There was no going back after what she did. Brian tossed our old phones into a donation bin the next town over, and I watched the numbers light up like unwanted stars before going dark for good. We didn't owe anyone an explanation, least of all her. As the city limits faded in the rearview, our new future was a cozy apartment in a nameless neighborhood, where the nosy next-door neighbor couldn't pick her out of a lineup, much less us. It was a good setup, neat and clean, with just the right amount of space for two people looking to dodge the ghost of family drama. We unpacked our lives, minus the baggage of anyone else's mistakes. Brian hammered together discount bookshelves with the sort of focus you might mistake for anger if you didn't know him. But that was just Brian being Brian, all in or nothing. "I'm not thinking about her, you know," he said over the squeal of a stubborn screw. I nodded from where I sorted our collection of DVDs, comedy stacked separate from the action, a place for everything. I know. We didn't talk about her after that. We didn't need to. Weeks spun out and the city we left might have been another planet for all the market left. But small talk has a way of traveling, and it wasn't long before a text from an old neighbor found its way to us through the blurry social network of people we used to know. She'd gotten off with a suspended sentence and a wad of fines instead of jail time, now spending her days scanning groceries and chipping away at her mountain of debt. We heard she's living in a place with cracks in the walls and plumbing from the dark ages, but if she was looking for sympathy, she wouldn't find any here. Brian read the text over my shoulder and huffed out a laugh that almost sounded like relief. "Guess she's getting by, then," was all he said before going back to his new video game, thumbs tap dancing over the controller like it was just another day. And really, it was no more drama, just us and our quiet life. "Gets what she deserves," I muttered, deleting the text and blocking the number. "No loose ends." "Yeah," Brian agreed, pausing his game to look at me. "But that's her circus, not ours." We knew that somewhere out there she was still picking up the pieces, but we were too busy building something new to care. Sometimes people break things too badly to put them back together, and that's just the way of it. Our world was small but full, weekly movie nights and lazy Sundays, bills paid on time and no calls in the night to shake us from our sleep. "Think she'll try to find us?" I asked once, the closest I came to asking what if. Brian's eyes met mine, steady and sure. "Let her try." So we just kept living, quiet and low, like two survivors after the storm had passed. No looking back, no echoes of the past, just forward to the next day and the day after that.
My name is Lily, a 27-year-old nurse, and my world changed when I met Mark, a charming patient with a broken leg at the hospital where I worked. After a few months of dating, he surprised me with a proposal, and I was elated. However, meeting his family, especially his mother, Margaret, was a day I dreaded, and for good reason. We arrived at Mark's family home on a sunny Saturday afternoon. The house was large and imposing, a stark contrast to my modest upbringing. I clung to Mark's arm, seeking some comfort as we rang the doorbell. Margaret opened the door, her expression neutral. "You must be Lily." "Come in," she said, leading us into a lavishly decorated living room. The air was stiff with formality. As we sat down, Margaret began her interrogation. "So, Lily, Mark tells us you're a nurse. That's a noble profession. And your parents, what do they do?" I cleared my throat, feeling her piercing gaze on me. "My mother works as a saleswoman in a department store. She's been doing it for years." "And your father?" Margaret pressed on, her tone suggesting she was digging for something more. I felt my cheeks warm up with embarrassment. I never knew my father. My mom raised me by herself." Margaret's eyes widened, and her lips pursed in disapproval. You mean you're a child of a single mother? No father figure? How peculiar. And no telling what kind of man your father was. Could have been a criminal, or mentally unstable. I sat there, stunned, feeling a rush of emotions: embarrassment, anger, hurt. Mark, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up, his voice tinged with anger. Mom, that's enough. Lily's family background doesn't matter. I love her. But Margaret continued, undeterred. Mark, you must think about the implications. A girl from such a background. It's not suitable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like a bad dream. I wanted to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come out. Mark stood up, his face red with anger. Mom, I can't believe you're saying this. Lily is the woman I love, and I won't stand for you talking about her like that. Margaret shrugged, her expression cold. I'm just stating the obvious, Mark. It's for your own good. The rest of the visit passed in awkward silence. We left soon after, but Margaret's words echoed in my head. The ride home was quiet. Mark kept apologizing, but the damage was done. The aftermath of meeting Margaret left me uneasy, but I tried to shake it off as Mark and I started planning our wedding. Eager to mend bridges, I decided to personally send out invitations to Mark's relatives, including Margaret, hoping for a fresh start. One evening, as I was finalizing the guest list, Mark sat beside me, looking over the names. Do you think my mom will come, after everything? He asked, a hint of concern in his voice. I hope so. Maybe this will help smooth things over, I said, trying to stay optimistic. A few days after mailing the invitations, I received an unexpected call from Mark's grandmother. Her voice was hesitant, laced with regret. Lily, dear, I'm afraid I have some bad news, she began. What is it? I asked, a sense of dread building up. It's about the wedding. None of us are coming. I'm so sorry, but Margaret called everyone. She said some awful things about you, spreading rumors, and then begged us not to attend, she confessed. I was stunned. But why would she do that? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and disappointment. She's convinced you're not right for Mark and is doing everything to stop the wedding, the grandmother explained. Mark overheard and took the phone. Grandma, is this true? Did Mom really say all that? Yes, Mark. I'm so sorry. We all are, she replied sadly. After hanging up, Mark was seething with anger. I can't believe she'd go this far. This is unacceptable. I felt a wave of humiliation and sadness. She's trying to ruin our wedding, Mark. What do we do? Mark took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. We'll still have our wedding, Lily. Just us and a couple of friends as witnesses. We don't need anyone who doesn't support us. I nodded, appreciating his support but still feeling the sting of rejection. Okay, let's do that. A small, intimate wedding. We proceeded with our plans, but the joy of preparing for our big day was overshadowed by Margaret's actions. Despite the setback, we were determined to celebrate our love, even if it meant having a wedding without Mark's family. Our modest wedding, though not what we initially planned, was beautiful in its own right. However, the real challenge came during a family dinner hosted by Margaret a few weeks later. I had hoped that, over time, she would come to accept me, but that night proved otherwise. As we sat around the dinner table, surrounded by Mark's relatives, the atmosphere was tense. Margaret, as if on cue, began her subtle jabs. So, Lily, I heard your wedding was quite the small affair. Budget constraints, I presume? She asked, her voice dripping with condescendence. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. We wanted something intimate and personal, I replied, trying to keep my composure. Margaret smirked, or perhaps it's because you couldn't afford anything grand. It must be tough on a nurse's salary. Mark, sitting beside me, clenched his fists under the table. Mom, that's enough. We're happy with how our wedding went. But Margaret was relentless. I just find it amusing, dear. Marrying into our family and yet unable to host a proper celebration. It says a lot about your background. The room fell silent, everyone avoiding eye contact. I felt isolated and humiliated, the weight of her words crushing me. Mark stood up, his voice raised in anger. Mom, stop it! You're being incredibly rude and disrespectful to my wife. Margaret shrugged, feigning innocence. I'm just stating the obvious, Mark. It's clear she married you for financial stability. I felt a lump in my throat, fighting back tears. Mark took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. That's it, we're leaving, Mark announced, his voice steady but filled with disappointment. We got up, and as we walked to the door, I turned to Margaret. I may not come from wealth, Margaret, but I have something money can't buy, integrity and love. Something you clearly lack. The drive home was quiet, the air filled with unspoken words. Mark kept apologizing, but the humiliation I felt at that dinner was a bitter pill to swallow. That night, lying in bed, Mark spoke softly. I'm sorry about my mom, Lily. I never wanted you to go through this. I know, Mark. But it's not your fault. We'll get through this, together, I said, finding strength in our unity. After the ordeal with Margaret, I knew I had to make a positive change in our family dynamics. My first step was to connect with Mark's grandmother, a sweet elderly lady who had always shown me kindness. I decided to use my nursing skills to help her with her medical needs and, hopefully, bridge the gap in the family. The following week, I started my mission. I visited her with my medical kit in hand, feeling a mix of determination and nervousness. Grandma Jane, I thought I could help with your injections and checkups. I know it's been hard for you to get to the clinic, I said as she welcomed me into her cozy living room. She looked at me, a bit surprised but pleased. That's very thoughtful of you, Lily. I appreciate it, she said, her eyes twinkling. As I prepared her medication, we began to chat. How have you been feeling lately? I asked, trying to keep the conversation light and friendly. Oh, you know, old age doesn't come alone, but I manage. Tell me, how is married life treating you? She inquired, her voice warm. It's good, Grandma. Mark is wonderful. We've had some ups and downs with the family, but we're happy, I replied honestly, carefully giving her the injection. She winced slightly but then smiled. I've heard about the troubles. I don't approve of how you've been treated, Lily. It's not right. I sighed, finishing up with her injection. Thank you. It's been tough, but I'm trying to make the best of it. From then on, our visits became a regular occurrence. Each time, I'd help her with her medical needs and spend some time chatting. We bonded over shared interests, like gardening. She showed me her beautiful garden, and we spent hours talking about different plants and flowers. Did you know that marigolds are supposed to keep pests away? She once told me, her face lit up with enthusiasm. No, I didn't. That's really interesting, I replied, genuinely enjoying our conversations. One day, as I was leaving, she took my hand. "Lily, I want you to know that I see you as part of this family. You're a good person, and you make my grandson happy." Her words warmed my heart. "Thank you, Grandma. That means so much to me." Our relationship grew stronger with each visit. Mark noticed the change too. "I can't believe how much Grandma likes you. She always asks about you," he said one evening, a smile on his face. "It's nice. She's a wonderful person. I think we understand each other," I responded, feeling a sense of achievement. Through my efforts with Grandma, I had started to mend the rift in Mark's family. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope that, in time, the others might see me for who I truly was. It was a long journey ahead, but I was ready to face it with patience and determination. Encouraged by my growing bond with Grandma Jane, I decided to reach out to Mark's cousins, Sarah and Emma. I had met them briefly before, but we never really got the chance to know each other. I thought a friendly gesture might help break the ice, so I invited them out for coffee. We met at a cozy cafe one Saturday afternoon. Sarah and Emma looked a bit hesitant at first, but I was determined to make a good impression. "Thanks for meeting me here. I thought it'd be nice for us to get to know each other a bit more," I started, smiling warmly. Sarah, the more outspoken of the two, tilted her head slightly. "Yeah, we were a bit surprised by the invite, given everything that's been going on." Emma nodded, looking a bit uncomfortable. "We've heard a lot from Margaret. It's been awkward, to be honest." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I know there's been a lot of talk. I just want you both to know that I really care about Mark and being part of the family." We chatted about various topics, slowly easing into a more comfortable conversation. I learned about their hobbies, their jobs, and shared some of my own experiences. "You're actually pretty cool, Lily. We only ever heard one side of the story," Sarah admitted, sipping her coffee. Emma chimed in, "Yeah, I think we misjudged you based on what we were told. It's nice to see a different side." Feeling a sense of relief, I suggested, "Maybe we can hang out more often?" "I'd really like that." Both Sarah and Emma smiled. "We'd like that too," they responded in unison. From that day on, we started to build a friendship. We'd go out for movies, have lunch together, and soon I was part of their close circle. They even began to defend me in family gatherings when Margaret tried to make sly remarks. One evening, as Mark and I were having dinner at home, I told him about my progress with his cousins. "Sarah and Emma are really great. We've been hanging out quite a bit." Mark looked up, a smile spreading across his face. "That's awesome, Lily. I'm glad you're getting along with them. I think it's important for you to have allies in the family." After forging a bond with Mark's grandmother and cousins, I felt a newfound confidence. It was time to reach out to the broader circle, his aunts, uncles, and other relatives. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. One Sunday, Mark and I hosted a small barbecue at our place. We invited his extended family, hoping for a relaxed setting to break down barriers. Surprisingly, most of them accepted the invitation. As our guests arrived, I could sense their curiosity and a bit of hesitation. Mark's Aunt Carol was among the first to arrive. I greeted her warmly at the door. "Welcome, Aunt Carol. We're so glad you could make it," I said, offering her a friendly smile. She studied me for a moment, then smiled back. "Thank you, Lily. This is quite a lovely home you have here." During the barbecue, I made an effort to chat with each of them. Uncle Mike, who was known for his love of gardening, found common ground with me as we discussed different plant varieties. "So, you're into gardening too, Lily?" he asked, intrigued. "Yes, I love it. There's something so peaceful about working with plants," I replied, sharing my experiences. Mark's cousin, Jenna, joined our conversation. "I've heard some things from Grandma about you. Seems like you've been a big help to her." I nodded. She's a wonderful person. I enjoy spending time with her. As the afternoon went on, the initial awkwardness gave way to laughter and shared stories. I helped serve food and made sure to engage in conversations, showing them the real me, not the version Margaret had painted. Toward the end of the event, Aunt Carol pulled me aside. "Lily, I'll be honest, we heard a lot from Margaret, but today showed us a different perspective. You're nothing like what she described." Her words were a victory, small but significant. "Thank you, Aunt Carol. I just want to be part of the family and make Mark happy," I said, feeling a sense of accomplishment. After everyone left, Mark wrapped his arms around me. "You did great today, Lily. Everyone seemed to really enjoy your company." "I think we made some progress," I said, hopeful. "Maybe, over time, they'll see that I'm not the person Margaret claims I am." Each conversation, each shared laugh was a step towards a better relationship with them. It wasn't just about disproving Margaret, but about creating a family bond based on truth and understanding. The Christmas season approached, and surprisingly, Margaret extended an invitation to Mark and me for a family dinner. Despite our reservations, we decided to accept, hoping for a peaceful holiday. The evening arrived, and the house was beautifully decorated. Margaret welcomed us with a forced smile. "Lily, dear, I need help in the kitchen. Would you mind?" I nodded, albeit reluctantly. "Of course, Margaret." As I followed her into the kitchen, she started delegating tasks. "Could you handle the salad and set the table? I want everything to be perfect." I busied myself with the tasks, trying to stay positive. The relatives began to arrive, filling the house with chatter and laughter. The tension was palpable when we all sat down for dinner. Margaret stood up, glass in hand, for a toast. "I'd like to say something before we begin," she announced, her voice loud and clear. Everyone fell silent, anticipating her words. "I would like to ask Lily to leave. She is an unnecessary addition to our family gathering," she declared, looking directly at me. The room erupted in murmurs of shock. Mark stood up, his face red with anger. "Mom, what are you doing? This is unacceptable." But before he could continue, I placed a hand on his arm, signaling him to let me handle it. I stood up, facing the family, my voice calm but firm. "I understand that I am not welcomed by everyone here. So, I will leave. But I want to extend an invitation to anyone who wishes to join us at our home. We would be happy to celebrate Christmas with family who appreciate and respect us." To my surprise, one by one, the relatives began to stand up. Aunt Carol was the first to speak. "I think I'll take you up on that offer, Lily." Uncle Mike and several others followed. "We're coming too," they chimed in. Margaret sat there, stunned, as almost every guest stood up to leave with us. In our home, the atmosphere was warm and welcoming. Laughter and cheerful conversation filled our living room as we celebrated with those who chose to join us. Later in the evening, as we were all enjoying dessert, Margaret's number flashed on my phone. I could hear her angry voice, but I chose to turn off the phone and focus on the joyous occasion around me. After the Christmas fiasco at Margaret's house, our celebration at home turned out to be a delightful affair, full of warmth and laughter. The night was winding down, and the atmosphere was relaxed, with everyone sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. That's when we heard a knock on the door. Mark glanced at me, a questioning look in his eyes, before he went to answer it. I followed him, curious about the late-night visitor. Standing there, in the cold night air, was Margaret. Her face was a mix of anger and desperation. "Mark, I demand to be let in. This is ridiculous, turning your mother away on Christmas," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with emotion. "Mom, after what you did tonight, I can't let you in. You hurt Lily and embarrassed us in front of the whole family," Mark replied, his stance firm yet his voice filled with regret. "But I'm your mother. How can you choose her over me?" Margaret's voice cracked, revealing a hint of vulnerability. "It's not about choosing, Mom. It's about respect and love, something you've consistently denied Lily," Mark said, his voice steady. I stepped forward, feeling a mix of pity and resolve. "Margaret, I've always wanted to be part of this family, but not at the cost of my dignity." She looked at me, her eyes searching for something, perhaps a sign of weakness or a chance to argue. But finding none, she let out a sigh, a mixture of defeat and bitterness. "Fine, have it your way. Enjoy your perfect little family," she said bitterly before turning away and disappearing into the night. Mark closed the door quietly and turned to me, his eyes filled with an apology he didn't need to voice. Back in the living room, the mood had shifted slightly, but Aunt Carol broke the silence. "You two are strong together. Don't ever let anyone come between that," she said, smiling kindly. "We won't, Aunt Carol, we won't," Mark replied, wrapping an arm around me. That night, as we cleaned up after the guests had left, Mark and I reflected on everything that had happened. It was a bittersweet realization that sometimes, in order to find peace, one must stand firm against those who disrupt it, even if they are family. In the days that followed, life returned to normal, but the events of that Christmas left a lasting impact on us. We learned the importance of setting boundaries, the value of respect in relationships, and the strength that comes from standing united in the face of adversity. Margaret's actions had, inadvertently, brought us closer to the rest of Mark's family. And while we hoped for reconciliation one day, we knew that our little unit, built on love and respect, was strong enough to weather any storm.
My name is Emily, and this is my story. It's not your typical fairy tale, but it's mine, and I wouldn't change a thing. I'm 29, have a great job, a loving husband, Alex, and a cozy little house we call home. But life wasn't always this kind to me. 10 years ago, I was a different person. At 19, I found myself lost in a whirlwind of corporate parties and social drinking. It started innocently enough, a drink here, a party there. But before I knew it, alcohol became my crutch, my escape from stress and loneliness. Those 3 years are a blur, a time I'd rather forget but can't. Everything changed when I hit rock bottom and realized I needed help. I turned to a special center where people like me, battling their demons, found solace and strength. It was hard, but I came out sober and have been that way ever since. Alcohol, can't stand it now. It makes me sick just thinking about it. 2 years ago, I met Alex. He was different from anyone I'd ever known. Kind, understanding, and he had this way of making me laugh even on my worst days. We had a whirlwind romance, and I knew he was the one. But I couldn't start a life with him holding on to my secret. So, one evening, I told him everything. My struggles, my rehab, my sobriety. I remember how nervous I was, sitting there on our old couch, fidgeting with the hem of my shirt. Alex listened quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, there was a long pause, and my heart was racing. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Emily, your past doesn't define you. It's who you are now that matters." He hugged me, and at that moment, I knew I was safe with him. We got married a year later. It was a beautiful ceremony, simple yet perfect. But then came the reception, and with it, my first encounter with Diane, Alex's mother. I always knew she was a bit intense, but that day, she cornered me with a question that caught me off guard. "Why aren't you drinking, Emily? It's your wedding," she asked, a glass of champagne in her hand. I felt my throat go dry. Alex had told me to be honest, so I was. "I don't drink, Diane. I used to have a problem with alcohol, but I've been sober for years now." The look on her face was a mix of shock and something else. Contempt? It was hard to tell. "An alcoholic," she muttered under her breath. I felt my heart sink. Alex jumped in. "Mom, it's not like that. Emily's overcome so much. She's the strongest person I know." Diane didn't say anything more, but her cold stare stayed with me. That was the beginning of our rocky relationship. Little did I know, it was just the tip of the iceberg. After the wedding, life with Alex was everything I dreamed of. But there was a shadow hanging over us, and that shadow had a name: Diane, my mother-in-law. She never said anything outright about my past, but her disapproval was clear as day. It started with small comments. "I'm just surprised Alex chose someone with your history," she'd say, or, "In our family, we usually handle our problems without making a fuss." Each word was like a tiny needle poking at my confidence. One Sunday, we were invited to dinner at Diane's. Alex was in the kitchen helping his dad with the grill, and I was left alone with Diane in the living room. The air was stiff with unspoken words. "So, Emily, how's work?" Diane asked, not even looking up from her magazine. "It's going well, thanks. Just finished a big project," I replied, trying to sound cheerful. She hummed, her eyes still on the pages. "I just hope you're not overworking yourself. We wouldn't want any old habits to resurface." I felt a flush of anger, but I bit my tongue. Arguing with Diane wasn't going to help. "I'm doing fine, Diane. Thanks for asking." Alex walked in then, saving me from more of Diane's jabs. "Everything okay in here?" he asked, glancing between us. "Perfect," Diane smiled, as if our previous conversation never happened. "Just chatting with Emily about her job." The dinner was tense, at least for me. Diane played the gracious hostess, but her eyes kept darting to me, like she was waiting for me to slip up. I stuck to water, even though the wine was flowing freely around the table. After dinner, when we were alone, I told Alex how I felt. "I don't know, Alex. It's like she's always judging me, waiting for me to make a mistake." Alex put his arm around me. "I know my mom can be tough, but she just needs time. She'll come around, you'll see." I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Diane had made up her mind about me, and nothing I did was going to change it. The drive home was quiet. I stared out the window, lost in thought. Alex reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll get through this, Em, together." A few months had passed since the wedding, and Alex's family planned a big gathering. It was a sort of annual tradition, a summer barbecue where everyone from his side of the family would come. I was nervous, but Alex reassured me that it would be fine. The day was sunny and warm, perfect for a barbecue. Everyone was there, aunts, uncles, cousins. The backyard buzzed with laughter and chatter. I tried to blend in, helping with the food and setting up tables, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Diane was there, of course, floating around, greeting everyone. Then, during lunch, she called for everyone's attention. My heart sank. I had a feeling I knew what was coming. "Family," Diane began, her voice loud and clear. "I think it's important we all know who we're welcoming into our family. Emily, here, has a past. She's a recovering alcoholic." The words hung in the air. I felt every eye in the backyard on me. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. Before I could say anything, Alex's Uncle Mike, who I hadn't spoken to much before, stood up. "Well, Diane, since we're sharing, I might as well say I'm 10 years sober myself. It's not easy overcoming something like that. Takes a lot of courage and strength." I looked at him, surprised and grateful. Diane's face tightened, but Mike continued. "I think what Emily has done is remarkable. She should be commended, not judged." Then, one by one, other relatives started chiming in. "We all have our struggles, Diane," said Alex's cousin Sarah. "Emily's past doesn't define her." Even Alex's grandmother, a sweet but stern woman, added her voice. "Diane, dear, this isn't the time or place. Let's be a family that supports, not one that tears down." Diane was outnumbered. She mumbled something about just being concerned and walked off. Alex came over and gave me a tight hug. "See? They love you." The rest of the afternoon went surprisingly well. Uncle Mike even shared a bit of his own story with me, and I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't expected. It was like his words had broken some invisible barrier, and I found myself chatting and laughing more freely. As we drove home, I felt a mix of emotions. I was still upset about Diane's stunt, but I was touched by the unexpected support from Alex's family. "Your family is amazing, Alex," I said, leaning back in the seat. "Yeah, they're pretty great," he replied, smiling. "And now they're your family too." The support from Alex's family at the barbecue gave me a much-needed boost, but Diane wasn't the type to give up easily. I started noticing little things that didn't sit right with me. It began with a casual family dinner at Diane's house. She had always kept a few bottles of wine around, but that night, the dining room looked like a minibar. Bottles of all sorts were displayed prominently. I caught her eyeing me, almost as if she was daring me to take a drink. "Mom, you've outdone yourself with the drinks," Alex commented, unaware of the tension. "Oh, you know me? I like to have options for our guests," she replied, her voice too sweet. I stuck to water, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just hospitality. A few days later, Alex and I were at home when he mentioned something that made my heart drop. "Mom's been suggesting I should relax more, have a drink in the evening. She even gifted me some fancy scotch." I tried to keep my voice steady. "That's nice of her, but you don't have to drink if you don't want to." He laughed. I know. Just thought it was a bit odd, her insisting on it." That's when it hit me. Diane wasn't just targeting me. She was trying to weave alcohol back into our lives through Alex. The last straw was a conversation I accidentally overheard. I was at Diane's house, helping her set up for another family event. I thought she was in the garden, so I was surprised when I heard her voice coming from the living room. Peeking in, I saw her talking on the phone, not noticing me. "I'm telling you, she'll slip up eventually," Diane was saying. "If she's around alcohol enough, she'll go back to her old ways. Then Alex will see I was right about her." I felt sick to my stomach. She was plotting against me, trying to make me relapse. I didn't know what to do. Confront her? Tell Alex? I felt trapped and scared. At home, I sat Alex down and told him everything. The drinks at dinner, the scotch, and what I overheard. He was shocked. "Mom wouldn't do that, Emily. Maybe you misunderstood." "I wish I did, Alex, but it's all adding up. She's trying to make me drink again." Alex looked torn, caught between his wife and his mother. "Let me talk to her, okay? This has to be a misunderstanding." The days after my talk with Alex were filled with tension. He said he spoke to Diane, but things didn't change much. I was on edge, always careful around her, especially with drinks. Then, something wonderful happened that brought a glimmer of hope. I found out I was pregnant. Alex and I were over the moon. We shared the news with Diane, hoping it might soften her attitude. "Oh, a baby," Diane said, her voice flat. "That's news. Congratulations." Her reaction was underwhelming, but I didn't let it bother me. I was too happy about the baby. A couple of weeks later, Diane invited us over for dinner again. I was cautious, given her recent behavior, but Alex convinced me to give her another chance for the sake of family harmony. Dinner started off well enough. Diane was on her best behavior, or so it seemed. Then came dessert, a cake that Diane had baked herself. "It's a special recipe," she said, serving us generous slices. I took a bite and immediately knew something was off. There was a strong taste of alcohol, cognac maybe. I put my fork down, feeling nauseous. "Diane, is there alcohol in this cake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked surprised, then chuckled. "Oh, just a splash for flavor. It's completely cooked off. Don't be so dramatic, Emily." I pushed the plate away, feeling betrayed and sick. Alex was frowning. "Mom, you know Emily doesn't drink. Why would you add alcohol to the cake?" Diane's attitude shifted. "It's just a cake, Alex. If she's so sensitive, maybe she shouldn't be eating dessert." I couldn't take it anymore. I excused myself and went outside for air. Alex followed me. "I'm sorry, Em. I don't know what's gotten into her." "I told you, Alex. She's doing this on purpose. She knows I'm pregnant and still she—" Alex hugged me. I know. I'll talk to her again. This isn't right." But talking seemed pointless. Diane had crossed a line. I couldn't trust her, not with me, not with our baby. And the worst part? I felt like Alex was still struggling to see how deep this went. That night, I lay awake, thinking about everything. Diane's actions, Alex's reluctance to fully confront her, our baby's future. I needed to protect my family, but I felt so alone in this fight. The incident with the cake stayed with me. I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal. I tried to talk to Alex about it, but it felt like he wasn't fully grasping the seriousness of his mother's actions. One evening, we were sitting in the living room, and I decided to bring it up again. "Alex, I can't stop thinking about the cake Diane made. It's like she's testing me, pushing my limits." Alex looked up from his book, his expression one of concern mixed with frustration. "Em, I know it seems that way, but maybe you're reading too much into it. Mom can be insensitive, but I don't think she's doing it to hurt you." I felt a surge of frustration. How can you say that? After everything? She's not just being insensitive, she's being malicious. And with the baby on the way, I don't feel safe around her. Alex sighed, putting his book down. "I know you're upset, but that's still my mom you're talking about. Maybe we just need to give her some space, let things cool down." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Give her space. Alex, she's trying to sabotage me. I overheard her planning it. What more proof do you need? He ran his hands through his hair, a sign that he was getting stressed. "I just can't believe she'd go that far. I'll talk to her again, okay? I'll make her understand that she can't keep doing this." But his words didn't reassure me. It felt like he was still in denial about his mother's intentions. And the more he tried to downplay it, the more isolated I felt. The next few weeks were tough. I started avoiding Diane as much as possible, which wasn't easy with all the family events. And every time I had to see her, I was on high alert, worried about what she might say or do. Then one day, something happened that made me question everything. Alex and I were at a family barbecue, and I overheard a conversation between Diane and one of her friends. "Yes, I've been trying to get through to Emily," Diane was saying, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I'm just worried about her, with the baby and all. You know how she used to be." Her words stung. It was like she was painting herself as the concerned mother-in-law, while making me look like an unstable mess. I confronted Alex about it on the drive home. "She's telling people she's worried about me, making it sound like I'm a ticking time bomb." Alex's response was quiet, uncertain. "Maybe she's just trying to find a way to connect with you, in her own way." I felt a rush of disappointment. Her own way, by making me look bad? Alex, why can't you see what she's doing? He didn't have an answer, and the rest of the drive home was silent. The tension in our home was becoming unbearable. Alex was trying to keep the peace, but I could see he was torn. I knew I had to do something drastic to show him the truth about his mother. One night, I sat him down at our kitchen table. Alex, I have an idea, but I need you to trust me. It's the only way to show you what your mom is really like. He looked hesitant. What are you thinking? I want to set up a sting operation. I'll pretend to fall off the wagon, get drunk, and call your mom over. We'll see how she reacts when she thinks I'm alone and vulnerable. Alex was shocked. That's a big risk. What if it backfires? It's a risk I'm willing to take. I need you to see her true colors. Will you help me? After a long pause, he nodded. Okay, I'll do it, but I'll be right there, hiding, just in case. The plan was simple but risky. A few days later, I called Diani, pretending to be drunk. Deanne, can you come over? I'm not feeling good. Alex is at work, and I don't know what to do. I could hear the eagerness in her voice. I'll be right there, Emily. We set everything up. Empty wine bottles were scattered around, and I lay on the couch, pretending to be passed out. Alex hid in the bedroom, ready to come out when needed. Diane arrived in record time. As soon as she saw me, a smile spread across her face. I knew it. I knew you'd slip up eventually. I stayed still, listening as she continued. You're going to ruin my son's life. But don't worry. I'll make sure he knows the truth about you. Then she said something that chilled me to the bone. It's better this way. If you lose the baby because of your drinking, it's for the best. That's when Alex stormed out of the bedroom. Enough, Mom! How could you say such things? Diane turned, her face a mix of shock and anger. Alex, what is this? Why are you here? He was livid. I heard everything, Mom. How could you be so cruel? How could you want harm to come to Emily and our baby? Diane tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. Alex had heard everything. He told her to leave and not come back until she could accept and respect us. After she left, Alex turned to me, his eyes filled with remorse. I'm so sorry, Emily. I should have believed you. I never thought she could be so hateful. I was shaken, but relieved. It's okay, Alex. Now you know. We need to protect our family, and that includes protecting ourselves from your mom. He hugged me tight. You're right. You and the baby are my priority. I'm sorry it took me so long to see the truth. After the confrontation with Diane, there was a palpable shift in our home. Alex was deeply troubled by his mother's actions and words, and I could see the conflict tearing at him. We knew things couldn't continue as they were. A few days later, Alex sat down across from me, a serious look in his eyes. I spoke to Mom, he began, his voice heavy. I tried to explain how her actions and words have hurt us, especially what she said about the baby. I held my breath, bracing myself. And how did she take it? He shook his head, pain etched on his face. She wouldn't listen, Em. She just kept saying things, terrible things. She called our baby the child of an alcoholic. She refuses to accept you or our child as part of the family. I felt a sharp sting in my heart. The words cut deep, but I wasn't surprised. So what happens now? Alex reached for my hand, his grip firm. I told her she's not welcome in our house anymore, not until she can respect us and our family. I can't let her hurt you or our baby. The finality in his voice was something I'd never heard before. Are you sure about this, Alex? She's your mother. He nodded, resolute. I am. You and our baby are my priority now. I love my mom, but I can't allow her to continue treating us this way. The decision to cut ties with Diane was a hard one, especially for Alex. But it was necessary for the well-being of our little family. We needed peace, stability, and love, things that Diane, in her current state, couldn't offer. In the following weeks, we focused on each other and the arrival of our baby. It was a time of mixed emotions. There was the joy of anticipation, but also the sadness of the rift in the family. Yet, through it all, Alex and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the challenges we had faced. As I looked ahead, I knew there would be more obstacles, more tough decisions, but I also knew that together, Alex and I could face anything. We had chosen a path of love and respect for ourselves and for our child. And that made all the difference.
I guess I always knew my mother didn't want me. Not in the way most kids wonder about it sometimes. I mean, she really, actively didn't want me around. Even my earliest memories are tainted by her absence and indifference. "Emily, sweetie, mommy's going out tonight. Jessica will watch you," she'd say, already halfway out the door in her designer clothes, not even waiting for my response. Jessica was just one in an endless parade of babysitters who kept me company while my mother lived her life without me. I remember my 7th birthday. Dad had planned this whole special breakfast, pancakes with whipped cream and sprinkles, my favorite. He'd gotten up early to make everything perfect before heading to work at his construction supply store. Mom was supposed to take me to the party place later that day. All my classmates were invited. I sat in my party dress for hours, waiting. She never showed up. When Dad got home that evening and found me still sitting there, trying not to cry, his face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "Where the hell is your mother?" he demanded, pulling out his phone. I could hear her voicemail message playing over and over as he tried calling. Finally, around 8 p.m., she breezed in, shopping bags in hand. "Oh my God, was that today? I completely forgot. I was at the salon and then Sarah called about this amazing sale." Dad cut her off. "Our daughter's birthday party, Helen. You forgot our daughter's birthday party. Don't be so dramatic, Robert. We can reschedule it," she said, rolling her eyes as she headed upstairs. "Emily understands, don't you, sweetie?" I slipped away to my room during their argument, hugging my knees to my chest. Even then, I knew this wasn't normal. Other moms didn't forget their kids' birthdays. Other moms didn't spend more time with their friends than their children. Other moms showed up for school events and parent-teacher conferences, things my mother considered boring and beneath her. But I had Dad, and he was enough. He made up for her absence in every way he could. Despite running his store, he always found time for me. He'd wake up early to make my breakfast, help me with homework in the evenings, and on weekends, we'd have our special daddy-daughter adventures, trips to the park, movies, or just hanging out at home building pillow forts. I learned to stop expecting anything from my mother. When she forgot to pick me up from school, I'd call Dad. When she missed my school plays, I'd look for Dad's proud face in the audience. When she was too busy with her friends to help me shop for my first training bra, Dad awkwardly but lovingly took me himself. We were a perfect team. I had gotten used to our little family dynamic, Dad being both mother and father, while Mom floated in and out like some glamorous but distant relative who happened to live in our house. I was 15 when I got the call. It was a regular Thursday evening, and I was doing my homework, waiting for Dad to come home from the store. When the phone rang, I assumed it was him telling me he'd be late again. Instead, it was the police. "Is this the residence of Robert Thompson?" a serious voice asked. The next few minutes are still a blur in my memory. Drunk driver. Wrong lane. Head-on collision. No chance of survival. The words washed over me like ice water, but they didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Dad had texted me just hours ago, asking what I wanted for dinner. Mom was out with her friends, of course. The police had to call 3 times before they reached her. When she finally came home, she was already playing the part of the devastated widow, mascara artfully smeared down her cheeks. "Oh, my poor baby," she wailed, pulling me into an awkward hug that smelled of wine and expensive perfume. "We'll get through this together." The funeral was a spectacle I'll never forget, but not because of my grief, because of my mother's performance. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than Dad's monthly mortgage payment, and she sobbed dramatically at all the right moments. Everyone kept telling her how strong she was, how brave. "I don't know how I'll manage," she told everyone who would listen, clutching her handkerchief. "But I have to be strong for Emily now. I'll take care of her twice as much as before." Robert would have wanted that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell everyone that she hadn't taken care of me at all before, so twice of nothing was still nothing. But I stayed silent, focusing instead on the real pain in my chest, the crushing reality that Dad was gone. The days after the funeral were even worse than I'd imagined. Mom's promises of increased attention lasted exactly 3 days. By day 4, she was too devastated to cook dinner. By day 5, she needed to process her grief at a spa day with her friends. By week 2, she was going on dinner dates to help her heal. I spent most of my time alone in my room, surrounded by memories of Dad. That's when Grandpa Jim, Mom's father, started coming around more often. At first, he just brought groceries and checked if I was eating. Then he started inviting me over to his house. "Emily, honey," he said one day, his kind eyes studying my face, "how about we make your dad's famous pancakes?" I think he'd want us to keep that tradition alive. That was the first time I'd smiled since Dad died. Grandpa's house became my sanctuary. While Mom was out rebuilding her life, her words, I spent afternoons with Grandpa, cooking comfort food, watching old movies, or just walking in the park near his house. "How are you really doing, kiddo?" he'd ask, actually listening to my answers. "What's on your mind today? Any plans for the weekend?" It was strange how my mother's father could be so different from her. He actually cared about my answers, remembered the names of my friends, and knew what was going on in my life. We'd spend hours in his kitchen, trying out new recipes or just talking about Dad. For the first few months after Dad's death, Mom seemed perfectly happy with our new arrangement. While I spent my time at Grandpa's house, she was free to pursue her social life without any guilt or interruption. That is, until people started talking. I overheard Mrs. Peterson from next door one day. "It's so sad," she was telling another neighbor. "That poor girl practically lives at her grandfather's house now. Helen's never home, always out with some new man." What kind of mother? That's when things changed. Mom suddenly started paying attention to where I was going and, more importantly, who knew about it. "You can't keep running to your grandfather's house every day," she snapped one evening when I was putting on my shoes to leave. "What will people think? That I can't take care of my own daughter?" I couldn't help but laugh. "But you don't take care of me, Mom. You never have." Her face turned red. "I am your mother. I've done everything for you." "Name one thing," I challenged her. "One single thing you've done for me since Dad died." She couldn't answer, of course. Instead, she banned me from visiting Grandpa, saying I needed to spend more quality time at home. Quality time apparently meant sitting alone in an empty house while she went on dates with her latest prospects. I told Grandpa about Mom's new rule during one of my band visits. He just shook his head and sighed. "Your mother," he said, choosing his words carefully, "has always been focused on what others think of her. Not on what's real." He patted my hand. "Don't worry about her rules, Emily. You're always welcome here." Then one day, during my senior year, Mom came home practically bouncing with excitement. "I've met someone," she announced over dinner, which was rare enough to be noteworthy. "His name is George." I barely looked up from my plate. I'd heard this before, at least 5 times in the past 2 years. There was Richard the lawyer, too boring, Michael the doctor, too busy, James the business owner, too focused on work, and several others whose names I hadn't bothered to remember. "He's different," Mom insisted, noticing my lack of enthusiasm. "He's established, mature." When I finally met George, I had to bite back a laugh. He was everything Mom had always said she couldn't stand in a man: short, overweight, and at least 15 years older than her. This was the same woman who had once broken up with a guy because he was only 5 feet 11 inches. "Isn't he wonderful?" Mom gushed after he left that first night. I studied her face, trying to understand what game she was playing now. The George I'd just met was pleasant enough, but he was the complete opposite of Mom's usual type. She'd always gone for tall, athletic men who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. The kind of men who matched her carefully cultivated image. Over the next few months, I witnessed something I'd never seen before, my mother trying to actually act like a mother. The transformation was both fascinating and disturbing to watch. "Emily, sweetheart," she'd call out when George was visiting, "would you like to join us for dinner?" The first time she did this, I nearly choked on my water. In the past, whenever Mom had boyfriends over, my role was to become invisible. "Stay in your room," or "why don't you go to a friend's house," were her usual instructions. But with George, everything was different. She'd suddenly become this picture-perfect mom, asking about my day at school, pretending to help me with college applications, even making my favorite meals, or rather, ordering them from restaurants and presenting them as homemade. "Isn't it wonderful how close Emily and I are?" she'd tell George, while wrapping an arm around my shoulders. I'd have to fight the urge to shake it off, knowing this was all just another one of her performances. One evening, she actually pulled me aside before George and his family arrived. "Emily, please, act like we're close. Like we have a good relationship. Can you do that for me?" I played along, mostly out of curiosity to see how far she'd take this charade. And she took it far, all the way to my graduation day. She showed up with George and his family, wearing a tasteful designer dress and the proud smile of a mother who'd been there every step of the way. She even brought flowers and tears and hugged me in front of everyone. "My beautiful, brilliant daughter," she gushed, making sure George and his family could hear. "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished." The day after graduation, though, the mask came off. She waited until George had left for a business trip, then called me into the living room for a talk. "Emily," she said, her voice no longer holding any of the warmth she'd displayed at graduation. "You're 18 now, and it's time for you to move out." I stared at her, thinking I must have misheard. "What?" "I'm tired of playing mother," she continued, examining her manicured nails. "You're an adult now. You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. I put up with you for 18 years. That's enough. I want you out of the house by tomorrow." I sat there, shocked by the sudden shift, but not entirely surprised. This was the real woman behind the mask, the one I'd known all my life. Without another word, I went upstairs and started packing. Years of living with her had taught me to expect nothing, so I'd always kept my important things ready to go. Within hours, I had everything I needed in a few bags and boxes. Grandpa opened his door before I even knocked, one look at my face telling him everything he needed to know. "Your room is ready," was all he said, helping me carry my bags inside. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He knew his daughter too well. Living with Grandpa felt like finally being able to breathe after years of holding my breath. The day after I moved in, he sat me down at his kitchen table. "Emily," he said, sliding an envelope across to me. "I want you to go to college." Inside the envelope was enough money for 4 years of tuition. When I tried to protest, he held up his hand. "Your father would have wanted this," he said firmly. "And I want this. End of discussion." So I enrolled in college, determined to make both him and Dad proud. But I couldn't just sit back and let Grandpa handle everything. Despite his comfortable retirement and generous savings, it didn't feel right to depend on him completely. That's why I picked up a job as a waitress at the Silver Spoon Cafe near campus. "You don't need to work, sweetheart," Grandpa would say whenever he saw me coming home tired from a late shift. "I know," I'd reply, "but I want to." The cafe job wasn't glamorous, but it gave me enough money for books, supplies, and most importantly, little gifts for Grandpa. Nothing expensive, a new coffee mug with a silly saying, a vintage record I'd find at a thrift store, his favorite cookies from the bakery across town. His face would light up every time, not because of the gifts themselves, but because he knew they came from my own earnings. Life fell into a comfortable routine. Classes during the day, work in the evenings, weekends with Grandpa. I hadn't heard from Mom in almost 3 years, and I preferred it that way. But Grandpa still kept tabs on her through family connections. "Your mother's doing well for herself," he mentioned one Sunday over breakfast. His tone was neutral, but I could sense his disapproval. New Mercedes, designer clothes, fancy jewelry. George seems to be quite generous. I pushed my eggs around my plate. Good for her. She's been telling people she's paying for your college tuition, he added quietly. Says she's been supporting you financially all this time. My fork clattered against the plate. She what? Oh yes, Grandpa continued, according to her, she's been the model of maternal support. Tells anyone who'll listen about how she's helping her daughter through college. Something about this sparked my curiosity. Mom had always been status conscious, but this level of lifestyle change seemed extreme, even for her. That evening, I did something I'd never bothered to do before. I Googled George. What I found made me nearly drop my phone. George wasn't just well off, as I'd assumed. He was George Harrison III, heir to the Harrison construction empire. His family practically owned half the state. Their name was on buildings, stadiums, and charity foundations. The smallest of their annual donations to local causes was more than what most people made in a decade. Suddenly, Mom's complete personality transformation made sense. She wasn't just fishing for a wealthy husband, she was aiming for the top of the social ladder. And somehow, she'd managed to hook one of the biggest fish in the pond. The phone call came during my junior year. Seeing Mom's number on my screen after 3 years of silence made my stomach turn. "Emily, baby?" Her voice had that fake sweetness I remembered so well. "I need you." I almost hung up, but something in her desperate tone made me listen. "The wedding is in 2 months," she continued quickly, probably afraid I'd cut her off. "George's family, they're very traditional. Family values mean everything to them. I need you there." I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. "People have been asking questions," she went on, her voice dropping. "Why doesn't your daughter visit? Why isn't she in any family photos? George's mother is particularly concerned. She keeps saying family unity is the cornerstone of their dynasty." "So this is about appearances," I said flatly. "No, well, not entirely. Emily, please. I'm begging you. Just come to the wedding. Show everyone we're a happy family. That's all I'm asking." My first instinct was to refuse, to tell her exactly where she could stick her invitation. But then an idea started forming in my mind. "I'll come," I said. "And I'm bringing Grandpa." The wedding day arrived in a blur of crystal, silk, and old money. The Harrison family had booked the most exclusive venue in the state. Watching Mom float around in her designer wedding dress, playing the role of the perfect society bride, I almost reconsidered my plan. She looked genuinely happy, greeting guests with that magnetic smile of hers, basking in the admiration of the cream of society. For a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt about what I was about to do. Then she spotted me. "Emily, my darling daughter," she exclaimed loudly, rushing over to embrace me. The nearby guests turned to watch the touching mother-daughter reunion. "I'm so happy you're here. I forgive you, sweetheart, for abandoning me all these years. I know you were just going through a phase, spending all that money I sent you for college on God knows what." I stiffened in her embrace, but she held on tighter. George approached us, beaming. "Emily, I'm so glad you decided to make peace with your mother. She's been so worried about you." He turned to Mom with genuine concern in his eyes. "I hope you can forgive her too. Parents and children sometimes struggle to understand each other." That was the moment I knew I had to go through with my plan. This kind man, and all these people, deserved to know the truth. I turned to the wedding coordinator. "I'd like to make a speech before the ceremony," I said. A tribute to my mother. I stood at the microphone, my hands surprisingly steady. The elegant crowd turned to face me, champagne glasses in hand, expecting the usual loving daughter's pre-wedding tribute. Mom beamed from her seat of honor, George's hand in hers. "I want to tell you all a story," I began, my voice clear and calm. "A story about my mother, the bride. Not the version you'd been told, but the truth." Mom's smile flickered slightly. 3 years ago, the day after my high school graduation, my mother called me into our living room. Fortunately, I had the presence of mind to record that conversation. I pulled out my phone. "I'd like to share it with you all." Before Mom could object, her own voice filled the hall. "I'm tired of playing mother. You're an adult now. I want you out of the house by tomorrow." The recording continued, capturing every cruel word, every dismissive tone. The room grew deathly quiet. "That was the last time I spoke to my mother until she called about this wedding," I continued into the silence. "She threw me out with nothing, no warning, no support. For 3 years, she hasn't called, hasn't checked if I was alive or dead. My grandfather, her father, has been paying for my college education, providing me a home, being the parent she refused to be." Mom jumped to her feet. "She's lying. Daddy, tell them she's lying." All eyes turned to Grandpa, who stood slowly from his seat. "Every word my granddaughter has said is true," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "Helen, you abandoned your child. Just as you neglected her entire life, even when her father was alive." The great hall erupted in whispers. George's mother, a dignified woman in pearls, looked like she might faint. His father's face had turned to stone. "Is this true?" George asked Mom, his voice shaking. "Did you throw your own daughter out? Abandon her?" Mom's carefully constructed facade cracked. "I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," George cut her off, standing up. His face had transformed from confusion to disgust. "You're not the woman I thought you were. You're not the woman I could ever marry." "George, please," Mom pleaded, mascara running down her cheeks, real tears this time. "She's lying. They're both lying." "The recording doesn't lie," George said firmly. "And neither does your father." He turned to address the stunned crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize, but there will be no wedding today." Mom crumpled into her chair, her perfect world falling apart around her. The woman who had thrown me away like garbage, to chase her dreams of wealth and status, was finally facing the consequences of her actions. 2 months after the wedding that never was, I was having Sunday breakfast with Grandpa when someone started pounding on his front door. The desperate rhythm of the knocking told me who it was, before I even heard her voice. "Daddy, please, I know you're home. I need to talk to you." Grandpa and I exchanged looks across the table. He nodded slowly, and I stayed in my seat as he went to open the door. Mom burst in, designer clothes wrinkled, makeup smeared, looking nothing like the polished socialite she'd been at the failed wedding. She stopped short when she saw me, but quickly recovered, probably deciding my presence might help her case. "Daddy, I'm desperate," she began, tears already flowing. "This is all your fault, yours and Emily's. You've ruined everything." I watched her silently, stirring my coffee. The woman who'd thrown me out of my home was now standing here, playing victim once again. "I took out a loan against the house for the wedding," she continued, pacing the kitchen. "The flowers, the venue, the dress, everything was perfect. I thought once I married George, he'd help me pay it off. But now," she choked back a sob, "the bank is foreclosing. I have nowhere to go." "And this is our fault, how exactly?" Grandpa asked quietly. "If you hadn't let Emily tell those lies." "They weren't lies," I interrupted, speaking for the first time. "Every word was true. There's no point trying to deny it now." She whirled on me. "You could have waited until after the wedding. One more day, that's all I needed. One more day and everything would have been perfect." "Perfect for who, Mom?" "For you?" While you continued to lie to everyone about being this amazing mother who supported her daughter through college? I was going to make it right, she screamed. Once I married George, I would have had the money to actually pay for your college. I could have made all the lies true. Grandpa's laugh was bitter. Listen to yourself, Helen. You're not sorry for what you did to Emily. You're only sorry you got caught. Daddy, please, she switched tactics, moving closer to him. I need help, just a loan to tide me over. I'll pay you back, I promise. I just need enough to keep the house. No, you're not getting any money from me. Not after what you did to Emily. Not after how you've lived your life. Mom's face contorted with rage. Fine, keep playing happy family with her. I hope you're both happy with what you've done to me. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. That was the last time I saw her, though we heard about her through the grapevine. She lost the house, as expected. Last I heard, she was working as a receptionist at a small real estate office, living in a tiny apartment, all her designer clothes and jewelry sold to pay debts. As for me, I graduated college last month, with honors. My first paycheck from my new job at an accounting firm went toward buying Grandpa a gorgeous vintage watch he'd been eyeing. His eyes got misty when I gave it to him. I'm saving up now for my own apartment, something close to work. Grandpa insists I can stay with him as long as I want, but I think it's time for me to stand on my own feet, my choice this time, not because someone is forcing me out. Sometimes I think about Mom, about how different things could have been if she'd just been capable of loving someone other than herself. But I've learned that you can't make someone love you, can't make them be the parent you need them to be. All you can do is cherish the people who do love you, who choose to be there for you.